Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook, Sentinel of American Comics. Chapter 26. The morning sun shines on New York, and the golden light falls on the steel jungle. This bustling metropolis seems to be awakening from a deep sleep, glowing with amazing vitality. Dr. Connors, with messy hair, came to his laboratory as usual. As soon as he stepped through the door, he saw Davis, the director of the Osborne Group. This middle-aged man in a suit and tie often followed Norman Osborn. Ben's side is responsible for handling various business matters. Now, Mr. Davis walked into the laboratory arrogantly, looking arrogant as if no one else was around, and ordered his security guards to enter the archives room and start moving documents. The originally busy working atmosphere was suddenly broken. All the researchers looked at Connors with blank expressions. "Sorry, Dr. Connors, Mr. Norman has given you enough time and funds, but your research project has not made breakthrough progress, so it is time for Osborne Industries to terminate this failed investment." Davis wore a false smile. The one-armed middle-aged man in front of him was silent and his eyes were gray, as if he had lost all life. "It's just that as the top management of Osborne Industries, Davis has no mercy in his heart. Dr. Connors spent a lot of money and time, but in the end he still failed to produce any successful research results. From a business perspective, in other words, Mr. Norman should have stopped this project long ago and reduced the company's losses in a timely manner. You have 2 hours, please pack your things and take them away as soon as possible. This laboratory no longer belongs to you." Davis looked at a group of incredulous researchers with a sneer on his lips. "By the way, you are not allowed to take away any documents related to the research project. If they are searched by the security guard at the door, you will go to jail." Gwen stood at the door in a depressed mood. She finally entered this laboratory as an intern, but not long after, she had to leave in such a humiliating and embarrassing way. "My students are all good kids. They will not do such a thing, Mr. Davis," Connors said angrily when he saw the tall man standing at the door through the window. "You need to understand your identity, Dr. Connors." Davis glanced at the faded scientist and said with disdain, "I have read your information, Kurt Connors, you are in the mainstream scientific community. It's just a pitiful joke. No one thinks highly of your research. You are just a swindler who deceived Mr. Norman in some way. Now take your things and leave immediately." Listening to Davis's merciless sarcasm, Connors' whole face turned red. He was not good at words and could not make a strong rebuttal. He could only silently endure the humiliation and ridicule of the other party. Looking at the laboratory that was about to be shut down, Connors was heartbroken. He knew that his scientific path had come to an end and he had lost hope in life. "Doctor, are you okay?" Gwen asked with concern, holding a cardboard box in both hands. The pretty blonde girl looked around with a puzzled expression on her face. She didn't seem to see Sean in the past 2 days, and he couldn't be found in the school. She didn't know what that guy was up to. Connors waved his hand. He seemed to have aged 10 years for a moment, and his whole person exuded a heavy air of twilight. The one-armed middle-aged man glanced around, but did not see Sean's figure. Thinking of the other party's solemn words, Connors waved his hand. Connors smiled self-deprecatingly at the promise of things. They were just big words spoken by young people with enthusiasm. To maintain the normal operation of a laboratory, an unimaginable amount of money was needed. Sean is still just a college student who has not stepped out of the ivory tower. Even though he has extraordinary talent in scientific research, who would be willing to spend huge sums of money to sponsor a failed scientist when there is no result? "I shouldn't have had my hopes up from the beginning." Connors staggered out of the research room. If the human experiments had not been interrupted that day, he didn't know what the results would be. Even if he paid the price with his life, it would be better than having all the research results taken away like now. Then kicked out. "Dr. Connors." A familiar voice stopped Connors, who left in frustration. The one-armed middle-aged man turned around and saw a black Chevrolet parked at the entrance of the laboratory. Sean stepped out of the car, followed by a young man wearing gold-rimmed glasses. "Sean, you." Connors looked at the young boy with a bright smile and was speechless for a moment. The laboratory had been taken back and closed by Osborne Industries. According to the original contract, all research results and documents will be taken away. "Don't worry, Dr. Connors, all problems are solved." Sean was full of confidence. He introduced the young man next to him. This is Mr. James Wesley. He has a passion and vision for science that transcends ordinary people. I told Mr. Wesley about your research project. He would be more than willing to sponsor you to continue this research. Hello, Dr. Connors. Wesley enthusiastically held the one-armed middle-aged man's hand. The well-dressed Wesley was smiling, and no one could tell that he was once the personal assistant of a gang boss. Once your research is successful, it will be good news to countless disabled people. I am very optimistic about this project. The sudden good news stunned Connors, who had a dull personality. He never thought that Sean would solve this huge problem. Looking at Dr. Connors, who couldn't accept it all at once, Sean smiled understandingly. He took a document from Wesley's hand, walked straight into the noisy laboratory, and stood next to Di, who was giving orders. In front of Weiss. I don't know who you are, but please stop what you are doing now. Sean said bluntly. Davis glanced at this young boy who appeared out of nowhere with disdain. He didn't even bother to say anything, and directly waved his hand to the security guards to drag him out. Colleagues who worked together on weekdays all looked at Sean in surprise, as if they didn't understand why he had to stand up and stop him at this time. Even Dr. Connors couldn't do anything. What could he, an intern, do? Sean, Gwen shouted worriedly while holding the cardboard box. Looking at the burly security guard approaching, Sean smiled coldly. He slapped the document in his hand on Davis's chest and said, "Are you sure you want to do this? This is Mr. James Wesley and Osborne Industries. The signed transfer contract also has Norman Osborne's signature on it. This laboratory has been owned by Dr. Connors, and all your current actions are illegal." Every word spoken by the young boy was like a bolt from the blue. Davis took the document in a slight panic and flipped through it quickly. When he saw the signature and seal at the end, his face instantly turned pale. "I'm sorry, I didn't receive this news." Davis forced a smile and explained in a lowered posture. "Well, now I give you an hour to restore all of this to its original state. Don't take away anything from this research room, otherwise I will send you to federal prison." Finally, the young boy reminded him with seemingly good intentions that Mr. James Wesley, from Hell's Kitchen, once served the famous Kingpin. When Davis saw the bespectacled man standing outside the door, his face became even more expressionless. Who in New York is not afraid of Kingpin's vicious reputation? Looking at the Osborne Industrial executives leaving in a hurry, Connors was a little confused and asked, "What on earth did you say to him?" He seemed very scared. "I just told that gentleman that the scientist in front of you who seems to be talking nicely will turn into a lizard monster at night and then unscrew his head." Sean shrugged and replied with a smile. Connors smiled. How could such a lame fairy tale scare Davis? He did not continue to ask. Anyway, all the problems were solved and he could return to his research work. "Thank you, Sean." The one-armed middle-aged man sincerely thanked him. If the other party hadn't found a new investor for him, he would have lost all hope in his life. "We can create a better future, Dr. Connors." A smile appeared on Sean's lips. He had successfully taken the first step, and he would get more in the future. After a busy day at work, Matt Murdock returned to his shabby apartment. He did not turn on the lights, put aside his usual walking stick, walked straight to the living room and sat on the sofa. In the silent darkness, Matt's perception is more acute. He does not need to fumble forward like other blind people for fear of tripping over some obstacles. The developed senses allow this blind lawyer to see different things. World. Matt was abandoned by his mother when he was young and was raised by his father, a boxer. Later, his father paid the price with his life because he was unwilling to fake boxing for the gang. At a young age, he became an orphan without anyone to care for him. In an accident, young Matt's eyes were contaminated with radioactive materials, causing him to become blind. However, this strengthened his other senses. Later, under the rigorous training of a blind martial arts master, he mastered his superpowers, senses, and developed extraordinary skills, becoming a powerful warrior. Matt, who grew up in an orphanage, realized the need for rules to restrain people's behavior from an early age, so he made up his mind to study law. After some hard work, he was admitted to Columbia University. He successfully obtained a doctorate in law. After graduation, he suddenly discovered that the law was actually just a tool manipulated by the rich and powerful. So he angrily put on the Red Devil suit and transformed into the Daredevil of Hell's Kitchen, using violent methods to maintain the law. Justice. Kingpin is actually dead. Matt, sitting in the living room, still couldn't believe it. Using his identity as a lawyer, he investigated Kingpin, the man behind Hell's Kitchen, and found out that the other party's true identity was actually the famous real estate tycoon Wilson Fisk. This gang boss who has packaged himself as a real estate tycoon and social celebrity has been conducting various illegal businesses in private, including drug smuggling, arms trafficking, and even using illegal means to forcibly demolish and enclose land. It is completely called a heinous crime. It is Hell's Kitchen, a huge cancer. Matt once transformed into Daredevil and tried to send the gangster whose hands were stained with the blood of innocent people to the police station prison. Unfortunately, reality once again shattered his innocent thoughts. At least half of the people in the police station were bribed by the other party, and even the mayor and the district attorney were chatting and laughing with him. Not only Hell's Kitchen, but even the whole of New York was shrouded in Kingpin's dark power. Just when Matt was completely desperate, the underworld emperor hiding in the shadows and ruling the underworld of New York suddenly died like that. When he learned the news from the Braille newspaper, he even couldn't believe it. According to the official answer from the police department, the famous New York real estate tycoon Mr. Wilson Fisk was attacked by a group of terrorists on the night of the 16th. Unfortunately died. It's all so unreal. Matt knew what kind of terrifying strength Kingpin had. He had fought against the huge bald man and his bodyguard Bullseye before. He was totally powerless to fight back and almost died at the hands of the gang boss. If the Punisher hadn't suddenly burst out and saved him. However, such a powerful and terrifying pair would actually die in an attack. This is neither reasonable nor logical. Frank. Why are you coming to my house? Matt, whose thoughts were in turmoil, suddenly seemed to hear some unusual noise and then asked aloud. You're still as sharp as ever, Matt. A tall, burly man climbed through the window from the fire escape. He was wearing a black t-shirt with a skull printed on it. He was fully armed, like a mobile arsenal. I thought you had left Hell's Kitchen. Although Matt couldn't see, his other senses could completely replace the functions of his eyes. The burly man known as the Punisher laughed twice. I don't want to leave this chaotic place. Only Hell's Kitchen will have so many villains, thugs and robbers. Matt frowned. He didn't agree with the Punisher's method of killing any criminal without mercy. It was too cruel and too extreme. Hey, barrister, you know, that Kingpin guy is dead. The Punisher said with some regret in his tone. He was actually taken one step ahead. That fat man was my goal all along. Tell me why you're here, Frank. You won't come to me for no reason. Matt asked directly. The Punisher who makes criminals fearful is not a guy who finds people to chat with. Hee. The Punisher chuckled. He looked at Daredevil sitting in the dark and said, Matt, haven't you noticed anything unusual yet? Hell's Kitchen has changed. This sinful place filled with drug dealers, gangsters, and hippies is changing. With Kingpin's death, everything is different. The Punisher took out the bullets from the magazine and put them back one by one. In the darkness, the burly man's face showed a trace of solemnity. This man, who was more cruel and violent than the criminals, told everything he discovered. I have been following Kingpin's gang for a long time. They have always had business dealings with the Japanese hand, trafficking in people and drugs, and they take children away. Treated as a container for transporting drugs, smuggling activities are carried out secretly. Tonight, I was planning to go there and destroy the smuggling factory alone, but when I went there, I found that there was no one inside. I caught a gang leader and asked about the whereabouts of those children. Guess what answer did I get? Matt remained silent and did not speak. Since the audience did not support him, only one person from the Punisher continued. The gang leader whose arm I broke off said that the drug business and smuggling activities under his control were all. They have all stopped, and some people have handed over these shady illegal businesses to the Hand and the Russians. Ha 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 ha, isn't it funny? After Kingpin died, his men actually changed their ways. The Punisher laughed sarcastically. Someone manipulated all this. Matt mused that there was more to Kingpin's death than that, and what was coming out of Frank's mouth was confusing. I'm very interested in the guy who killed Kingpin. I really want to know what he's going to do. Transform Hell's Kitchen. The Punisher clenched his pistol and revealed a ferocious smile. Frank, you'd better calm down. Someone who can kill Kingpin must not be messed with. Matt admonished and said that because his family was massacred by gangs, Frank was full of hatred for all criminals, so he usually struck without mercy. The gangs he targeted often couldn't find anyone alive. Stop preaching, barrister. If you still believe in the law, how can you become Daredevil? Those rich people and gangsters who do all kinds of evil, as long as they can afford a luxurious team of lawyers, they can seizing all kinds of legal loopholes to escape sanctions. The justice and fairness of the law. Bullshit. The Punisher was indignant. He stood up suddenly, his burly body like a hill. Since the law can't punish those fools, then I can do it for you, in a more cruel way. Matt was silent. He had been in conflict in his heart. He once believed that the law could bring criminals to justice, but the reality was often cruel. As Frank said, in the hands of the rich and gangsters, the law became corrupted. For a piece of paper. You're too extreme, Frank. Matt said weakly. Someone is planning a big conspiracy. Matt, Hell's Kitchen will soon usher in a complete change, and we will all have to make a choice then. The Punisher sneered and left. He looked at Daredevil sitting on the sofa, a trace of disdain flashed in his heart. If he didn't have a firm and strong heart, why would he put on that Red Devil suit? The news of Kingpin's death initially caused huge waves in Hell's Kitchen. The underworld emperor who controlled countless gangs and ruled the New York underworld died inexplicably. Whether it was the Japanese hand, the Russian mafia, or the Mexican drug traffickers, they all couldn't believe it for a moment, but the chaos they expected did not happen. James Wesley, Kingpin's personal assistant, came out and won the support of many people. Of course there were also those who opposed it, but those people disappeared after expressing their opinions and could never be found again. In this way, the seemingly gentle personal assistant became the recipient of Kingpin's huge inheritance. What followed was a series of asset reorganizations and the distribution of various businesses. Weiss was originally responsible for handling these matters for Kingpin. Lee handled the situation quite well, and separated the illegal business from the seemingly legitimate company at an extremely fast speed. In other words, Mr. Wesley cleared himself in the shortest possible time and became an upstart tycoon with substantial assets. As for the other gangs who originally wanted to take the opportunity to swallow up Hell's Kitchen, after Wesley negotiated several times and divided the lucrative drug and smuggling businesses between the hand and other gangs, everything returned to its usual calm. Despite the expected bloody fights and gang fights, Hell's Kitchen is still moving forward according to its original life trajectory. The Hellfire Club, what a fitting name. Sean, wearing a hood, stood at the door of a nightclub, with a lifelike flame burning on the colorful signboard. "Hey kid." The burly security guard guarding the door was about to stop this young boy who looked like he was still a student, but was stunned by his cold gaze. "Be respectful, I am your boss's boss," Sean said seriously, and then walked past the security guard and walked into the hot nightclub. Huge and boiling sound waves rushed towards us, and the walls on all sides were faintly shaking. Under the dazzling and shining lights, many lonely and empty men and women swayed their bodies, releasing their inner emotions to their heart's content. DJs dressed in trendy costumes on the stage kept detonating the music, with people's enthusiasm. The air is filled with the smell of alcohol and hormones. This is a breeding ground for sin and desire. Sean observes the surroundings. In addition to the urban men and women who come to have fun, there are also many private dealers selling marijuana and drugs, as well as hot people dressed in fancy clothes. Prostitutes, these are the huge group that truly make up Hell's Kitchen's underclass. This is the real world. After a little sigh, Sean, under the guidance of the waiter, went to the luxurious private room on the second floor. The sound insulation effect here was good, and the noisy sounds from outside could not be transmitted in at all. "It's not easy to meet you, Mr. Wesley." Sean put down his hood, revealing his young face. "Boss, you really know how to joke. If you hadn't insisted on hiding your identity, you should be the one sitting here now." The elegant man offered red wine and cigars attentively. "These are the best, boss. Want to try it?" Sean waved his hand, indicating that he didn't need it. "You're doing a good job. We don't need to rely on those illegal businesses to make huge profits. Those other gangs entrenched in Hell's Kitchen think they have taken advantage. Sooner or later, the Night Demon will people like Heroes and Punisher will come to them. 80% of the real estate in Hell's Kitchen is in our name, as well as the business district of Manhattan, which is enough for you to maintain the operation of the company. Wesley nodded. He glanced at the young face of his new boss and felt some complicated emotions in his heart. Who would have thought that such a sunny boy who looked harmless to humans and animals would actually kill Kingpin and Bullseye, in one fell swoop, helped him become the upstart of Hell's Kitchen? Isn't there going to be a problem with Mr. Leland? Wesley asked. Leland was also one of Kingpin's confidants. He was a financial expert and was responsible for managing accounting books and business transactions. Smart people know how to do it, and I've always been good at problem solving. Sean smiled faintly, and Wesley couldn't help but lower his body slightly. He was also a smart man, so he naturally knew how the new boss would solve problems. I don't need you to be the boss of Hell's Kitchen at the moment. Now let those gangs fight and rob. We don't need to care. When we no longer need to keep a low profile, we can work together to destroy those who are like wild dogs. When all the gangs are eliminated, you will become the second Kingpin. The new ruler of Hell's Kitchen, the new emperor of the New York underworld. The young boy spoke in an understatement, but the beautiful prospect he described was enough to make Wesley's heart surge and his blood boil. How many people could not sit in that position throughout their lives? Wesley suppressed his inner excitement and said calmly, "All of this belongs to the boss." Sean was noncommittal. Smart people always have ambitions. He was not afraid of Wesley's betrayal at all, because the other party saw clearly that even a powerful hero like Kingpin would still die in his own hands. As long as Wesley puts himself in the shoes of the king and compares himself to the Kingpin, he won't try to make some stupid decision. I should be quite busy recently. If you have any problems that cannot be solved, you can contact me. Sean sat in the luxurious private room and admired the scene of the demons dancing downstairs for a while before getting ready to leave. There was a little lowly waiting at home. Kingpin's funds and industry are the cornerstone for Sean's first step. He has no interest in being the underworld emperor of New York. After all, underground forces cannot come to the fore. Compared with military industry giants like Stark Industries and S.H.I.E.L.D., the powerful institutions are really far behind. Anyway, after solving Connor's experimental funding problem, it should be Osborn Industries' turn next. I believe that after such a long time, the Green Goblin and Spider-Man should have a final showdown. After all, the news said that Norman Osborn had not shown up for a long time. It was obvious that the human enhancement potion had completely stimulated the negative emotions in his heart. Now that body is already occupied by the dark personality of the Green Goblin. Take the lead. There should be a good show to watch, Sean thought as he walked out of the nightclub. He glanced at the flames on the sign and thought of the mutants again. It was not the right time to contact them, especially before he could not resist the bald professor's psychic ability. He still tried to keep his distance. Good. Kingpin, Norman Osborn, who's next? Silently calculating the good cards in his hand, Sean couldn't help but feel satisfied. He was getting rid of his weakness little by little and growing rapidly. Even when the era of superheroes came, he would already be standing in the world by that time, the forefront. Coming to such a dangerous and wonderful world, how could Sean be willing to just stand underneath and look up to those superheroes? He wanted to control his own destiny, and at the same time control other people's. Hellfire Club, interesting. The young boy's eyes were deep and his back gradually disappeared into the darkness. The evening in New York has a charming style, and the afterglow of the setting sun shines on the bustling city, like a charming beauty who cannot leave. Harry returned home in frustration, looking downcast, as if he had suffered a huge blow. His rather handsome young face was full of a look of loss. In recent times, the stock price of Osborn Industries has been declining. With the exposure of the Green Goblin incident, public opinion has become one-sided. People have poured out their anger towards Osborn Industries. If they had done a good job in crisis public relations, it's not a big deal, but my father has been staying shut, as if he doesn't care about the crisis the company is encountering. He stays in his room all day long and doesn't want to see anyone. The leaderless Osborn Industries is now in a precarious situation. I heard that many shareholders on the board of directors are secretly contacting Wall Street bankers to prepare to dismantle this huge enterprise involving biogenetics, technology, energy and other fields. Divide and reorganize to reap huge benefits. Harry, who knew all this, was extremely anxious, but he had no way to solve the problems encountered by Osborne Industries. At this time, the young master of the Osborne family discovered that his girlfriend was actually having a relationship with his best friend Peter, with some ambiguous feelings. Under the double blow, Harry felt a little decadent for a while, and his mood became extremely low. On the one hand, the business empire that his father had worked hard to build for half his life was now in danger of falling apart. On the other hand, his best friend, whom he had known for many years, and his beloved the girl had an unclear relationship, and these complex and tangled problems made his mind confused. It would be nice if that guy Sean was here, Harry thought as he dragged his tired body. Sean's whereabouts have been elusive recently, and no one can be found. Even Gwen, who usually walks with him, doesn't know what this guy has been up to recently. Without a trusted friend to talk to about his depression, Harry can only lose his mind. Back home. In the bedroom upstairs, Norman Osborn was shut up, holding his head in his hands with a painful expression on his face. There seemed to be a terrible demon in his mind, whispering constantly. The ferocious demon helmet hung on the chair, like Norman Osborn's other self, and the evil voice lingered in his ears. Maybe Spider-Man is invincible, but we can destroy Peter Parker. Not long ago, Norman discovered Spider-Man's true identity, which was his son's friend Peter Parker. I can't do it. The president of Osborne Industries seemed to be enduring great pain at this time. I will never tolerate betrayal. I must teach him a lesson. The voice in his mind became more and more severe. Norman was trembling all over. After a while of silence, he turned around and looked at the ferocious demon helmet and asked, "What should I do?" Teach him what pain and loss are, let him suffer, let him live a life worse than death. Norman knelt down in front of the demon helmet, as if succumbing to another evil self, and the voice in his mind became clear. Start with the person he cares about first, the red-haired girl, Peter Parker's true love. The Green Goblin's evil personality completely gained the upper hand and dominated Norman Osborn's consciousness and body. He put on that ferocious demon helmet and unleashed the violence and negative emotions in his heart. I dominate New York tonight. The night breeze was blowing, and Sean and Gwen were strolling down the street with their bags. The neon lights were shining brightly, and the colorful billboards reflected the bustle of New York City. After a busy day, Sean originally planned to go home directly, but on the way he met Gwen, who was about to go shopping at the mall. At the girl's invitation, he also bought a bunch of snacks, drinks and comic books. The little loli at home has been very well behaved recently, so she should be rewarded appropriately. I live with my cousin in Canada. Her parents were in a car accident and she had no other relatives, so she had no choice but to come and seek refuge with me. It's so pitiful for such a young child to be sent to an orphanage. Sean explained calmly, with a look of compassion in his eyes, as if he was feeling sad for his cousin's unfortunate life experience. Such superb acting skills can definitely win an Oscar. You know, I lost my parents when I was very young, so every time I see Mindy, it's like seeing myself as a child. Sean sighed, with a trace of sadness on his face, as if he was recalling some sad past. This made Gwen on the side feel both sympathy and appreciation. Even though he encountered many misfortunes in his life, this young boy still did not leave. It's really admirable to go astray and face life positively instead. Seeing that Gwen completely believed this statement, Sean secretly breathed a sigh of relief. It is believed that this enthusiastic and generous blonde girl will no longer secretly inquire about his family situation. Because in the carnival, Sean staged a romantic drama of a hero saving a beautiful girl, Gwen has always been very concerned about her. On the contrary, she has no feelings for Peter, who was supposed to be with her, and she remains a normal friend relationship. This makes Sean feel like he's trying to break into the young Spider-Man every time he meets him, but given his character, he certainly doesn't feel guilty. Oh, by the way, what are you busy with Dr. Connors recently? I don't see you almost every day. The girl asked curiously, holding a pile of ingredients and CDs. Dr. Connors has found the formula for the decay rate algorithm, but it has not been able to solve the conflict and repulsion of biological genes. This is an issue that he and I have been working hard on recently. Sean said in a relaxed tone that he gave the formula of the decay rate algorithm to Connors precisely because he wanted to use the other party's scientific research capabilities to complete this historically breakthrough experimental project. Gwen covered her mouth in surprise. She didn't expect that Sean, who had just been an intern for a short time, could already be deeply involved in the experimental process. For a student who had not yet graduated, this was like a miracle. A night story. The two of them strolled through the bustling streets of New York, chatting with each other about some interesting anecdotes that happened at school. They occasionally talked about the complicated feelings between Harry, Peter, and Mary Jane. Unknowingly, the cheerful atmosphere became a subtle, vague atmosphere of ambiguity spreads between men and women. "That, Sean," Gwen suddenly called out to the young boy walking in front of her. The usually lively and beautiful blonde girl had a childish and innocent shyness at the moment. Even Sean, who had always remained calm, couldn't help but be slightly stunned. Just when Gwen was brewing her emotions and was about to pour out her inner feelings, a sharp siren pierced the night sky, and several police cars broke through the crowded traffic and drove towards the Brooklyn Bridge not far away. It seems something happened. Sean squinted his eyes and looked with his eyesight, and found that a huge crane was operating on the Brooklyn Bridge, and there seemed to be a school bus hanging outside the bridge. In the hazy night sky, a figure was flying up and down, and two tiny firelights flickered. "That's the Green Goblin." The corner of Sean's mouth curled up slightly. Seeing the thrilling scene of a school bus being hoisted high in the sky by a crane on the Brooklyn Bridge, he had a vague suspicion in his heart. Is the show about to begin? Dark clouds covered the stars and the bright moon, and darkness enveloped New York under the night sky. Mary Jane woke up from a coma and felt an inexplicable coldness. She stood up and looked around, only to realize that she was above the Brooklyn Bridge. Looking down, he saw the endless queue of traffic and the freighters and passenger ships passing by on the river. The cold wind blew against Mary's simple and thin body. The red-haired girl quickly grasped the metal door next to her frame, for fear of falling if not careful. Ha 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 ha. A burst of high-pitched laughter pierced the night sky. Mary Jane looked along the sound and found that it was the Green Goblin, the super-criminal who was causing trouble at the carnival. The notorious and terrifying demon was standing on a hang glider, laughing unbridledly. The micro-missiles carried on the glider were launched towards a construction site under the Brooklyn Bridge. There was a loud bang, surging firelight illuminated the night sky. Huge explosions resounded throughout the world, and airwaves rolled with flames. The cars driving on the bridge seemed to be frightened and hurriedly avoided. With a bang, they lost control and crashed into the guardrail next to them. Rear-end collisions occurred one after another. In an instant, the bridge became a long queue, dozens of cars crashed into a ball, and the scene was chaotic. The originally smooth traffic immediately lost order, and even the police cars that rushed over were unable to drive over. Sean and Gwen stood not far away and had a panoramic view of this scene. The Green Goblin obviously sent a challenge signal to Spider-Man, a good neighbor in New York. As expected, before long, a red figure looked like Tarzan. Usually, they rushed to the scene with a cobweb. Spider-Man. This is why fools become heroes, because you never know when one day a madman will give you a cruel problem. Let the woman you love die, or let the innocent child die. Spider-Man nimbly walked over the Brooklyn Bridge. When he arrived, the Green Goblin was holding Mary Jane with one hand and grabbing the steel cable hanging the school bus with the other hand, laughing full of malice. "Spider-Man, save us. Someone help me." When the children in the school bus saw the famous New York superhero, they screamed for help. On the other side, Mary Jane's whole body was hanging in the air. As long as the Green Goblin let go of his hand even slightly, she would fall to the bottom of the cold river. "Decide quickly, Spider-Man." The Green Goblin urged Spider-Man to make a choice as soon as possible. He loved the exhilarating feeling of toying with his opponents and watching them endure pain and struggle. Being a hero requires you to pay the price. The sharp voice was full of sarcasm. "Don't do this, Green Goblin," Peter begged, unwilling to abandon either side. "Destiny is in your hands. Now, make a decision." The Green Goblin looked at the hesitant Spider-Man, let out a weird smile, and then released his arms at the same time. The school bus and Mary Jane fell at the same time. The children's terrified screams and the cry for help from the beloved girl echoed in Peter's ears. Spider-Man decisively ran towards Mary Jane, flew down, and hugged the midair. The red-haired girl shot out another spider thread and stuck to the Brooklyn Bridge, saving the falling school bus in time. Peter held Mary Jane with one hand and tried his best to hold the falling heavy school bus with the other hand. At the same time, the Green Goblin also flew over on a hang glider. He would not sit back and watch Spider-Man save the citizens. Peter, who was hanging in midair, became a target of the Green Goblin. He had to hold the school bus and protect Mary Jane from harm, so he had to silently endure the Green Goblin's punches and kicks. It's time to die. A sharp blade popped out of the glider. The Green Goblin laughed and rushed towards Spider-Man. He wanted to end the life of this New York hero. Bang bang bang. Several gunshots were fired in succession, hitting the flying Green Goblin, and sparks burst out. Although the armor was bulletproof, the kinetic energy of the bullet still caused the Green Goblin to deviate from its original direction and rush to the other side crookedly. On the Brooklyn Bridge, dozens of police officers finally arrived, and the one who decisively shot him was the recently promoted police chief George. "Ah, that's my father." Gwen, who was watching the scene nervously, screamed and saw her father. "It's very dangerous there now, and you couldn't help much in the past. Don't worry, your father will be fine." Sean grabbed Gwen, who was trying to rush over. If she was affected by the battle between Spider-Man and the Green Goblin, it would be bad. Maybe she would have to take action herself. There were so many spectators gathered on the bridge. "Citizens, it's really hard to behave." On the Brooklyn Bridge, the battle continued. A freighter sailing on the river caught the school bus carrying children and teachers. Mary Jane was temporarily safe. Spider-Man could finally free up his hands to deal with the Green Goblin. Offensive. The two sides fought fiercely and were evenly matched. The Green Goblin relied on high-tech equipment and an endless stream of new weapons, while Spider-Man relied on his extraordinary skills to dodge flexibly, and from time to time he would shoot a web of spider silk to interfere with his opponent's flight. "Hey, New York hero, try this." The Green Goblin controlled the hang glider, waving a long steel cable in his hand, tied up Spider-Man in midair, and then dragged him away from the Brooklyn Bridge. "Okay, everything is over, you can go find Mr. Police Chief now." Sean smiled faintly. He was like a flower protector and sent the girl to the police car. Just when Gwen was about to introduce her to her father, she turned back and found that the young boy's figure had disappeared into the night. Bingo. In an abandoned old house, Spider-Man was thrown from a high altitude, smashed through the fragile roof and glass windows, and fell to the ground in embarrassment. Before he could get up, a pumpkin bomb rolled down at Peter's feet. The blazing fire set off air waves, and the strong shock wave directly flew Spider-Man away, knocking down a lonely wall, and the whole person was buried underneath the masonry. "You chose a tragic fate, poor Spider-Man." The Green Goblin jumped off the hang glider, walked up to Peter, who was covered in scars, and beat him fiercely like a violent storm. The injured Spider-Man was unable to fight back and had to let his opponent beat him wildly. "I thought you would resist more fiercely, but it's really pointless." The Green Goblin, who had the upper hand, tore off Spider-Man's mask, stepped on Peter's head with one foot, and said with a ferocious smile, "My son regarded you as a friend, but you failed him and that red-haired little fool. Let's get together. Peter Parker, you have to pay for this." Peter, whose face was covered in blood, raised his head with difficulty and looked at the terrifying demon helmet. "Uncle Norman. How could it be you?" The young Spider-Man couldn't believe that the gentle and respectable Uncle Norman, Harry's father, could turn out to be the ferocious Green Goblin. "It's a pity that you can only take this secret with you and say goodbye to the world forever." The Green Goblin had a murderous intention, and the violence and killing in his heart rushed to his brain like boiling blood. He kicked Spider-Man on the head hard. In the severe pain, Peter suddenly lost consciousness and fainted. "You actually want me to do it myself, Peter, you are really unreliable." Just when the Green Goblin was about to kill him, a young boy walked out of the shadows with a faint smile on his face, as if he had just finished enjoying a wonderful show. "Who are you?" The Green Goblin became wary. "Silly question." Sean strode forward, like an arrow from the string, and rushed in front of the Green Goblin in an instant. The ferocious fist brought up a strong wind, causing Spider-Man to suffer a lot. The Green Goblin was like being hit by a full-speed car. The powerful car hit him head-on, and his body flew out immediately. Click. A burst of intense pain swept through him, and the Green Goblin couldn't help but howl loudly. Sean directly stepped on one of the opponent's arms. He had no sympathy for this cunning and insidious super-criminal. Farewell to this world, Norman Osborn. Sean took off the Green Goblin's mask, revealing a pale and twisted middle-aged face. Please, let me go. Anything you want, I can help you get it. As long as you spare my life. The famous Osborn Industrial CEO was begging without dignity at this moment, and he would not hesitate to pay for it. Everything he owns is in exchange for a glimmer of hope. Oh, Mr. Norman, you are so dishonest. There was another clear bone crack, and Sean stepped on the other man's other arm without mercy. You want to control a hang glider. This is not what a smart person would do. Matter. What I want, I will get it in my own way. Mr. Norman, please accept death quietly. Osborn Industries, I will take care of it for you. Sean took out pumpkin bombs from the Green Goblin and arranged them in a circle under Norman Osborn's horrified eyes, as if performing some evil ritual. No, no, no. The Green Goblin tried to escape at the last moment, but was kicked back to the ground by Sean. The next second, a blazing wave of fire surged up and swallowed up the dying Norman Osborn. A fulfilling day. The young boy's back gradually disappeared into the darkness, leaving only a faint word, echoing under the silent night sky. I've been coming back late and late lately. I'm starving. I'm starving. When Sean stepped into the house, he immediately felt the deep resentment of a certain blonde Lolita. Mindy was rolling around on the sofa while eating ice cream, complaining about the late return of the nanny and part-time cook. Hey, can you be reasonable? Classmate Mindy McCready, I give you enough pocket money every day. At least you can go to a Chinese restaurant in Chinatown or a nearby Burger King for a big meal. Sean closed the door and looked at the reluctant little Loli with a speechless expression. This super-killing girl who once killed people without batting an eye has now transformed into a lazy fish who can only act coquettishly and cutely. Living a comfortable life with clothes on hand and food on hand every day made Sean feel that it was a hugely wrong decision to pick him back up in the first place. I'm almost going to be your housekeeper, Miss Mindy. Sean complained in a low voice, but he honestly put on his apron and started preparing dinner. Sean, in addition to being the most considerate nanny in the world, you are also the best cook and the most generous cash machine. Mindy, who was lying on the sofa watching How I Met Your Mother, was not stingy at all. Words of praise. By the way, did you get into a fight today? Little Loli turned her head and asked. Sean, who was busy in the kitchen, hummed. Mindy was very sensitive to the smell of her body. As long as she participated in a battle or a fight, the other party would notice it. I helped a superhero take down the villain. I think the New York Police Department should issue a certificate to encourage my selfless behavior in facing injustice and bravery for justice. Regarding Sean Tien's shameless behavior of putting gold in her face, Mindy sneered to express her contempt and disdain. The assassination of Wilson Fisk that shocked New York last week has not yet subsided. The mayor and Mr. the police chiefs jointly issued a statement, claiming that the murderer would be caught and that this cruel and terrible terrorist criminal would be punished by law and justice. For this reason, the entire Hell's Kitchen gang was more or less affected. Due to the pressure exerted by the above, the police began to investigate frantically, not letting go of any clues, and almost turning the New York underground world upside down. The Irish and Japanese hands, who originally thought they had taken advantage, are probably having a headache now. Are the police still investigating the assassination of Kingpin? Sean turned his head and asked. He still underestimated the impact of the death of a famous real estate tycoon. Moreover, this was not a simple assassination. Heavy firepower weapons such as rocket launchers were used. It was almost considered a terrorist attack. No wonder the New York Police Department was going crazy. Don't worry, they are still using the same old investigative methods, starting with weapons, tracking arms dealers in the black market, monitoring retired soldiers or killers who have recently entered the country. If they continue to search like this, they won't be able to find us even if the world ends. On the head. Mindy, who has experienced many battles, has a calm look on her face. Her father was once an elite policeman. He knows the methods of the police very well, and it takes only a matter of minutes to hack into the New York Police Department database. I'm not worried about the police. We have cleaned up all the clues. The main reason is that I'm afraid that if the organization gets involved, it will cause a headache. Sean finished cooking a sumptuous dinner and put Mindy, who was lazily lying on the sofa. Carry it to the dining table. He didn't want to attract Shield's attention early. Being targeted by the one-eyed black director would definitely not end well. Remember to wash the dishes after eating. Don't be cute. We agreed to do it once per person. It's your turn today. Sean looked at those big watery eyes without any fluctuation in his heart. Although he was not a saint, he still had the same moves. It becomes ineffective after being used too many times. The night was getting darker. After enjoying dinner, Sean glanced at Mindy, who was obediently clearing away the dishes and washing the dishes. He was secretly satisfied. There was still a long way to go to train the naughty child, and he was very happy to be able to achieve this level. Back in the room, Sean, who was preparing for daily physical training, frowned. There was something strange in his mind. He had had this strange feeling since he killed Kingpin and Bullseye last time. He wanted to solve it with his own hands tonight. The Green Goblin becomes clearer again. What happened? Calmly settling down, Sean closed his eyes and carefully felt the soft white light in his mind. The system panel that had not appeared for a long time resurfaced again. On the originally hazy frame, except for the last activated card option, there is another choice and a clear string of data. Quote. Redeem points. After his thoughts were immersed in it, Sean felt a little confused. What is this? Since the last time he accidentally activated the card option, Sean has been studying the system from the virtual fighting game in his mind for a while. Except for the mysterious bottle of potion at the beginning, the system's sense of existence has always been very low. No tasks are issued, there are no instructions, and there is not even a dialogue function. This made Sean think that he had gotten a fake system. The newly activated card option, which he himself had experimented with many times, must be a famous figure in the world, such as a superhero or a popular character, voluntarily giving some kind of teaching or guidance. Various cards of different levels will be generated, which are roughly divided into two categories: skill cards and item cards. To put it simply, if Tony Stark voluntarily tells Sean how to make the arc reactor, then he will get a blueprint of the arc reactor. If the Master Supreme in Nepal is willing to accept Sean as a disciple, professor with profound magical knowledge, he can gain a bunch of magic skill cards. It is equivalent to a cheating tool for quick learning. However, after several repeated experiments, Sean discovered that the generation of cards had a chance and was not 100% successful, so after studying it for a while, he put the matter behind him. Anyway, at this stage, he would neither go to seek apprenticeship with the Supreme Mage, nor would he rush to Tony Stark and ask him how to make steel armor. The exchange system, is it like a game, where you can use points to exchange for mission items? Sean was feeling faintly excited. He remembered that in the original game mall, there were mission props from various virtual spaces. If they could be redeemed, they would become the most powerful trump card in his hand. Defeat D+ level character Bullseye, reward 80 points. Defeat the C+ level character Jin Bin, and you will be rewarded with 100 points. Defeat B level character Green Goblin, reward 200 points. Quote. The system mall initialization is completed. Sean suppressed his excitement and quietly opened the system mall, which was flashing with white light. A dazzling array of data lists filled his entire brain. They were core props from various virtual spaces. Terminator World. Skynet, a computer-based artificial intelligence defense system created by humans in the late 20th century. Star Wars World. The Force, a supernatural and ubiquitous force with extremely high room for improvement. The Never-Ending World. NZT-48, it can activate the potential in the brain, open up every nerve joint, and give yourself an unforgettable memory and super intelligence. Sean's breathing was slightly heavy, and he could almost hear the sound of his heart beating violently. This was simply an endless treasure trove of things he could ask for. The technological power and civilization crystallization of different worlds were like commodities on a display cabinet, waiting for him to redeem them, which is equivalent to having countless world cores as support behind it. Maybe my footsteps are not limited to this world. The crazy joy lasted for a few seconds, and soon Sean calmed down. He calculated how to maximize the use of the points in his hand. His eyes scanned the rows of gleaming data lists, and finally settled on an item. With this, Osborn's problem becomes simple. Sean exhaled. That young face was full of longing and expectations for the future. The Avengers, the Infinity Stones, the Overlord of the universe, these will not be the end of his footsteps. Infinite excitement is waiting for him to explore. The patter of rain fell like countless silver threads from the cloudy sky. High-end cars were parked on the road outside the cemetery. Everyone had a solemn expression and a look of deep mourning on their face. This is the famous Trinity Church, located at the junction of Broadway and Wall Street in Manhattan. The funeral of the famous Norman Osborn was held here. This successful man who single-handedly created a huge business empire is now lying quietly in a cold coffin. The serious priest stands in front of the tombstone and talks about Norman Osborn's glorious past and glorious deeds to the standing crowd. The new successor of Osborn Industries, Harry Osborn, had a sad face. Even though he usually had an indifferent relationship with his father, he still felt extremely sad when his only relative in the world truly passed away. "Harry, you have to cheer up. Uncle Norman doesn't want to see you like this." Mary Jane, a red-haired woman, comforted her boyfriend softly. Peter, who was not far away, saw all this and couldn't help but lower his head and sigh. The young and immature Spider-Man didn't know what happened that night. He was beaten unconscious by the Green Goblin, and when he woke up, he found a burnt corpse. Peter had no idea that the person under the Green Goblin mask would be Harry's father, the respectable Uncle Norman. In the end, Peter decided to hide the cruel truth. Harry was already suffering from the pain of losing a loved one. If he were to know that his father, who was respected by outsiders, was actually a cruel and murderous Green Goblin, it would be unimaginable what would happen. Consequence. As for him and Mary Jane, Peter glanced at the red-haired figure who accompanied Harry and walked lonely into the rain. Through many battles with the Green Goblin, the young Spider-Man had grown a lot. He understood that as long as he still wore the Spider-Man, if he wears the Shaw's suit, he can't really be with Mary Jane, not to mention that the person who needs her most now is not himself. "Peter, where are you going?" Sean, holding a black umbrella, stopped Peter, who turned to leave. Looking at Sean, who came with Gwen, Peter smiled reluctantly. "I have something else to do, so I have to leave for a while." Looking at the lonely figure leaving in a hurry, Gwen looked up at Sean and said, "Peter, and Mary Jane, Harry, what on earth is going on with them?" Sean held a black umbrella and shrugged helplessly, indicating that he didn't know anything about it. Watching Spider-Man and his best friend trapped in a complicated and tangled love triangle, this feeling was quite strange, like watching a live-action version of Dogs. Blood drama. Gwen stopped asking questions and walked into the cemetery close to Sean. Today she was wearing a dignified black dress and a little makeup. Her long blonde hair was tied behind her head. She was no longer her usual youthful and pretty look, but adds a bit of mature temperament. By the time the Mass and Sacrament meeting after the funeral were over, it was almost evening. Harry, who had finished dealing with all the guests, walked into the living room with a trace of apology on his young and handsome face. "Sorry, Sean, I didn't expect to be so busy and made you wait for me all afternoon." Harry apologized to his friends as soon as he opened his mouth. He was so busy today, dealing with various shareholders of the company, and sorting out his father's personal connections during his lifetime. A series of trivial things piled up together made Master Osborn drink water. "There is no time. I'm sorry about your father." Sean leaned on the sofa and took a sip of strong black coffee. "You don't have to apologize to me, Harry. You have a lot of things to deal with, whether it's the company or not. It's your own. I can understand this feeling. A loved one who can rely on suddenly leaves, and you have to face the whole world alone. This is very uncomfortable." Harry's eyes were slightly red. Of course he knew Sean's rough life experience. His parents passed away when he was young. Later, even his only uncle also left this world, and he has been living a solitary life. "Thank you for your comfort. I'm very grateful that you can say these words to me at this time. This will make me feel better, at least I won't be as sad as before." Harry, who gradually lost his former frivolous nature, patted on the shoulders of his best friend. He is trying to learn to be a qualified helmsman of the company. He is no longer like before, he only knows how to indulge in fun. The first step is always the hardest. I heard about the current situation of Osborn Industries. The shareholders of the company are not very optimistic about you. They all want to jump off the big ship of Osborne Industries, and they also want to take some money. Get a huge reward. They are just a group of vampires who only want to make more profits and don't care about the life and death of other people. Sean put down the cup and looked at Harry with piercing eyes. His deep eyes seemed to be burning with fire. This was his first formal step to achieve his goal with the help of the vast stage of Osborne Industries. I never knew you knew anything about Osborne Industries. Harry seemed frightened by his friend's sudden change. He suddenly felt that Sean sitting opposite him was a little strange. He was sitting upright, with a faint smile on his face, but he had a strong aura similar to his father's, which made Harry doubt his own eyes for a moment. There is news like this in the newspapers every day. Everyone is badmouthing Osborne Industries, believing that this huge business empire will collapse with your father's departure. Sean tried to slowly stir up Harry's inner emotions. He knew this young Master Osborne very well. He was not as cunning as his father. He was just a rich second-generation man with a rather innocent personality and the characteristics of a young man. He has various advantages and disadvantages. He treats friends enthusiastically, likes to chase beautiful girls, enjoys a comfortable life, and lacks the enthusiasm to work hard and make progress. Compared to Norman, who single-handedly established Osborne Industries, there is no doubt that Harry is a more suitable partner. I will convince those shareholders that Osborne Industries will not go bankrupt. I will definitely make it successfully survive this crisis. The young man's blood rushed to him. Harry was talking grandly, but he didn't have any confidence in his heart. Of course he understands how critical the situation Osborne Industries is facing now. It has not obtained the procurement qualification from the Ministry of Defense, and all the large amounts of money invested in the early stage have been wasted. Moreover, coupled with the fermentation and impact of the Green Goblin incident, the company has even more trouble. The reputation of the company has plummeted. With the rupture of the capital chain and internal divisions, Osborne Industries has reached the edge of the cliff and may be shattered to pieces at any time. Facing Sean's penetrating eyes that seemed to see everything, Harry felt increasingly guilty. He was just a young man who took over the family business in a hurry. He had not received any systematic training or business education. He was suddenly going to take over a company involving military industry. A huge business empire in the fields of medical care and energy will inevitably have some confusion about its direction, and there is no one trustworthy within the company. To get through this difficulty, the most important thing is to make up for the huge losses of Osborne Industries in the military industry so that those shareholders can regain hope and prospects. In short, you need a powerful new product, once it is launched, the kind that can gain huge benefits. Sean held the chips prepared in his hand. Maybe Harry would doubt his purpose at first, but if he wanted to save Osborne Industries, he had no choice but to cooperate with himself. What's more, he didn't deceive this poor child who had just lost his father. He needed a stage to show off his skills, while Harry wanted to stabilize the crisis of Osborne Industries. Both parties would reap benefits from cooperation. It's a win-win situation, so why not? What exactly do you want to say? Harry looked at Sean, who had always been in control. Could this friend of his help Osborne Industries tide over the difficulties? Harry, Dr. Connors and I recently had a new research result for the treatment of Alzheimer's disease. We conducted the most preliminary in vivo experiments, and it turned out to be very effective. Sean sat on the sofa, throwing out the bait that had been prepared. If you are interested, you can go to the laboratory to visit. I injected ALZ-112 into a chimpanzee named Caesar. It quickly completed. Lucas, the tower game only takes 20 steps, and the perfect answer is 15 steps. Harry, it's time for Osborne Industries to give up the military industry. You are not Tony Stark. You cannot ask officials of the Ministry of Defense to send you countless orders. The medical industry has more benefits and potential. The prospects are extremely broad. As long as the new drug passes FDA, Food and Drug Administration, review, I believe Osborne Industries can definitely speed up this process. A lot of money will flow into our pockets. Hearing the prospects described by Sean, Harry was undoubtedly moved. In fact, he had no other choice except trusting his friends. Osborne Industry was in danger. If a solution could not be found, his father's life's hard work might be lost. That was all down the drain. This is something Harry absolutely cannot tolerate. He must keep Osborne Industries. I need to study data and results. Harry exhaled heavily, and collapsed on the sofa as if he had lost all strength. You will see it tomorrow. Sean stood up and stared at the complicated Harry with a smile on his face. You won't regret this decision, Harry, the future belongs to you and me. A silver Chrysler drove into the State University of New York. Sean and Harry were studying at Stony Brook. This school is located on Long Island, a suburb of the city. It is a famous research-oriented public university in the United States and enjoys a high academic reputation around the world, has the reputation of public ivy. The car drove into the school, followed a lush tree-lined path, and finally stopped in front of a rather old-fashioned white building complex. This was originally a laboratory established within the school. Many famous figures in the scientific community, and even several A Nobel Prize winners came from this place. It was later purchased by Norman Osborn and given to Dr. Connors as a research site. It recently changed hands again, bought out by a businessman from Hell's Kitchen, and now belongs to Kurt Connors. Of course Harry didn't know what was going on when he got out of the car. He took a deep breath and couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. After a conversation with Sean a few days ago, he carefully read through the research data sent and handed it to the Scientific Research Department of Osborne Industries. Was asked to conduct an evaluation, and the result was that this new drug has extremely promising profit prospects. So Harry, who was still a little skeptical, decided to go there personally. If the final result satisfied him, then saving Osborne Industries' crisis would no longer be a hopeless matter. Harry, you came earlier than I thought. Sean and Dr. Connors stood on the steps. They looked quite happy for the arrival of their guests. Let's go shopping first, or go directly to see Caesar. Come for a walk with me, I've never been here before. Harry smiled. He didn't want to appear too impatient. Sean nodded and said to Dr. Connors next to him, then I will accompany Harry to visit first. Doctor, go and bring Caesar out. Be careful, that little guy has a bad temper recently. The one-armed middle-aged man who was dull by nature nodded in agreement. He was not good at communication in the first place, not to mention that Osborne Industries once resolutely abandoned Connors when he needed help the most, so for this huge company facing difficulties, he doesn't have much favorable impressions. Anyway, just leave everything to Sean. This student always makes people satisfied, and this new drug for brain degeneration was also developed by the other party, and I just participated in some improvement work. Connors thought as he turned to leave. He is a pure scientist, and he has always been grateful to Sean for saving him from the difficulties in life. The current core project of the laboratory is still the cross-species inheritance studied by Dr. Connors. The regeneration of amputated limbs also has broad prospects in the medical industry. I think there will be many opportunities for cooperation between us and Osborne Industries. Sean walked in front and talked, while Harry followed behind, silently observing this somewhat old laboratory. Osborne Industries has its own scientific research department, which invests a large amount of money every year to carry out projects in various fields. Research, such as previous hang gliding and human augmentation programs, was undertaken to curry favor with the Department of Defense. Technology research and development is an industry that pays great attention to investment costs, and it is not possible to reap rewards every time. As the new president of Osborne Industries, Harry certainly knew that many scientific research projects that seemed to have great potential at first glance were actually just a fantasy that was difficult to realize. Even if a large amount of money was invested, there would be no return. If Sean really is a scientific genius. Harry looked at the young boy introducing the research room. He was about the same age as him, but his movements exuded a steady aura, which made people feel convinced involuntarily. Maybe this friend of mine is really a genius like Tony Stark or Reed Richards. Otherwise, why would Dr. Connors obey his words? Hey Harry, why are you here? Gwen, who was holding a pile of documents, asked in surprise. She had also heard about the current situation of Osborne Industries. This classmate who inherited his father's business had already completed the suspension of study. How could he appear in Dr. Connors' laboratory? Sean has a great product. Let me come over and take a look. Maybe it can bring the company back to life. Harry winked at Sean next to him. Of course, the experienced Master Osborne could see that Gwen was interested in his friend. Quite a favorable impression. Sean burst into laughter, briefly exchanged greetings with Gwen, and then took Harry to the center of the research room. Dr. Connors had already made preparations and was waiting for their arrival. This is Caesar, a chimpanzee from the South African rainforest. Through the transparent glass window, Sean introduced a young chimpanzee sitting in the room. The DNA of orangutans is very close to that of humans. Among them, the DNA of chimpanzees, the difference from humans is less than 1%, so I chose a chimpanzee as the material for the live experiment. What is it doing? Harry stood in front of the glass window, confused. The young chimpanzee named Caesar was sitting on a chair like an obedient student. There was a shelf and several metal discs of different sizes on the table. The researcher walked in with a plate of fruit. In the Lucasta game, you have to move the discs from one pillar to another. In this process, the big disc cannot be placed on the small disc. The perfect answer is 15 steps. Caesar can do 20 steps. It has improved to 16 steps in the past few days. Harry couldn't believe it. He saw the chimpanzee moving the metal disc skillfully and quickly completing the game. Then the researcher handed over the plate of fruit in his hand. This is incredible. Sean was not surprised that Harry would react like this. When Dr. Connors saw it, he also had a shocked expression. Caesar couldn't complete the game at first. No matter how much we trained him, he couldn't make him think. Memory, and then I injected it with a drug called ALZ-112, which is a genetic drug that allows the brain to create cells to repair itself. In biology, this is called neurogenesis. Of course, you can also think of it more simply as a miracle drug for treating Alzheimer's disease, that is, Alzheimer's disease. Harry looked at the chimpanzees in the room who were learning some simple pictures and words, and felt uncontrollably excited. This was an unprecedented new drug, enough to bring huge returns to Osborne Industries. Are there any side effects? Harry, who was excited, suddenly asked as if he thought of something. Of course, he will not forget that the human enhancement plan that dragged Osborne Industries into the abyss was abandoned by the Ministry of Defense precisely because it could not solve the side effects caused by injected drugs. A little bit. Sean looked at the nervous Harry and said with a smile, "Currently, Potion 112 has only had one side effect. For some reason, green spots appeared on the orangutan's iris, but this it should not be reflected in humans. How about it? Do you want to cooperate, Harry?" Sean stared at the other person calmly. It was time to make the final decision. This drug is not limited to Alzheimer's disease, it is also suitable for different types of brain surgery. Disease, its potential is limitless and can bring us huge benefits. Harry was silent for a moment, looking at the chimpanzees in the room who were no different from humans, and made a decision in his heart. With the energy and connections of Osborne Industries, it was enough to get ALZ-112 into the production stage as soon as possible and ready for the market. A human trial still needs to be conducted, Sean. If the results are still satisfactory to everyone, Osborne Industries will become your partner. Sean raised his eyebrows, patted Harry on the shoulder and smiled. "Of course, do you remember what I said? The future belongs to you and me." The young boy's eyes were shining, showing strong confidence. Harry Osborne acted quickly. After the company's scientific research department confirmed the authenticity of the experimental data, he directly informed Sean that the two parties had reached a preliminary cooperation intention. The new president of Osborne Industries saw that the person who really took the lead was actually his friend who was the experimental assistant, not Dr. Connors, the owner of the laboratory. Therefore, whether it is negotiating or signing a cooperation treaty, Sean is solely responsible for acting as the agent. Dr. Connors is also happy to do so. His research has reached the final critical stage and he has no intention of dealing with these complicated matters. In the conference room of Osborne Industries, a cheerful Harry stretched out his hand, and Sean, who had signed a formal contract, also stood up. The two looked at each other and smiled. As early as 3 days ago, the laboratory conducted the first human test. Facts have proved that ALZ-112 not only works on chimpanzees but also on humans. The achievement of this cooperation has allowed Osborne Industries, which has been suffering from public pressure and internal conflicts recently, to temporarily regain some vitality. Osborne Industries will reach its peak again in your hands, Sean said with a smile. After careful planning, he finally waited until the harvest period, and he was in a good mood. "Thank you, Sean. Don't forget that Osborne Industries now also has your share. You and Dr. Connors jointly hold shares in this company." A smile appeared on Harry's young face. The huge pressure these days has put this young man who hastily dropped out of school into an anxious and depressed mood. If Sean hadn't taken out ALZ-112 and saved the Osborne Industries that was about to collapse at a critical moment, Harry really couldn't imagine what he would have become. Sean smiled lightly. Since Osborne Industrial's capital chain was currently broken, cash flow was somewhat stretched. Therefore, when negotiating with himself, Harry decided to give a certain share of the company's shares as compensation. However, the agreement stated that it could not be held for a long time. Yes, we will settle the repurchase in cash after ALZ-112 is officially launched. This deal, which can be considered a happy one, was concluded. When Sean walked out of Osborne Industrial, he looked back at the towering modern buildings, his eyes flickering slightly. Maybe he was walking too fast and too impatient, which aroused Harry's subconscious vigilance, so the other party would add a special note to prevent him from joining forces with Dr. Connors to covet Osborne Industries. It's progressing very quickly. Sean shook his head, with an interesting look in his eyes. For him, Osborne Industries was just a springboard, and he had no intention of eating this rich cake. Next, it's time to wait for the results to come. The young boy put his hands in his pockets, his eyes full of expectation, and his tall figure gradually disappeared into the sea of people. Quote. Dr. Kurt Connors and Mr. Sean Cypers, the product they jointly developed, ALZ-112, is an epoch-making genetic drug and good news for all patients suffering from brain diseases. Osborne Industries is determined to contribute to this cause that benefits mankind, and we will join hands to promote this new drug to the market to save those who are suffering from the disease. On TV, the young and handsome Harry talked with great enthusiasm. He was able to respond to questions from media reporters with ease and showed his humorous side from time to time. Human potential is incredible. The Harry Osborne I met some time ago was just a rich boy who indulged in fun. Now he has transformed into a qualified group president. Sean sat in the cafe and took a sip of Blue Mountain coffee. Today, he was invited by Gwen. He gave himself a rare day off to go shopping with this blonde girl whose thoughts were already revealed. The one who is truly remarkable should be you. Gwen stirred the coffee in the cup, her beautiful eyes flashing with astonishing light. You completed the research and development and manufacturing of a new drug with Dr. Connors at such a young age, and it can be put on the market soon and create huge profits. Isn't such an achievement something to be proud of? What do you mean by that? I just stand on the system, oh no, on the shoulders of giants. There was a smile on Sean's lips. If he wants to reach the top of his life, it all depends on the power of the system. Anyway, you are already famous. You know, the newspapers portray you as a new generation of geniuses, just like Tony Stark and Reed Richards of Columbia University. They were all in their youth. Just stand out and show your extraordinary talents. Gwen was even more excited than the person involved. She recounted the exaggerated reports of the media reporters in a playful tone. Sean listened quietly and occasionally echoed a sentence or two. It's no wonder that Sean became a celebrity overnight. Compared with Dr. Connors, who had an ordinary experience in the first half of his life, his background is undoubtedly more storytelling. Not only did he achieve great achievements at a young age, he also lost his parents when he was young and was killed by his uncle. After he was raised and his only relative passed away, he lived alone and maintained excellent academic performance. He was admitted to the State University of New York through his own efforts, and then devoted himself to the great cause of science. Such motivational and inspiring news reports are what New Yorkers love to see. Every day there are scandals about a certain billionaire and playboy. Everyone is a little tired of it. It's time to change the taste and do something different. Things. Following reports from the news media, coupled with the conscious promotion of Osborne Industries, what was originally a simple and ordinary press conference was hyped as the birth of a genius scientist. Some people questioned that this was deliberately false commercial marketing, but once such a sound was made, and was immediately submerged in the boiling and noisy tide of public opinion. Who cares what the truth is? What everyone wants to see is an eye-catching legendary story, a story of a young boy working hard and becoming a new generation of scientific genius. Compared with Tony Stark, who inherited his father's business and acted dissolutely, this is the real America dream. As for what the facts are, no one cares. People just want the satisfaction of participating in this public opinion frenzy, nothing more. Sean saw clearly that Harry wanted to take this opportunity to reverse the negative image of Osborne Industries, while the news media finally found an excellent material and could not easily let it go. In order to increase newspaper sales, they continued to exaggerate. In fact, by the way, Tony Stark was brought in to hack it. Each party has its own purpose, and Sean is happy to do so. Anyway, everything he does has a reasonable explanation, not to mention Dr. Connors as a shield. Even if there are some small doubts, it doesn't hurt. Through the glass window, looking at the people coming and going on the street and the constant flow of vehicles, Sean suddenly felt a little dazed. He had finally taken his first step in this world. Gwen tasted the bitter yet sweet coffee, and placed her soft eyes on Sean. The young boy seemed to be deep in thought. The afternoon sun shone through the glass and fell on the other person's young face, adding an inexplicable feeling of mystery and attraction. Soothing music flowed in the air, the surrounding noise gradually faded away, and a quiet and subtle atmosphere spread. When Sean came back to his senses, he found Gwen sitting opposite, her beautiful big eyes like a wave of spring water, staring closely at himself, his confused affection almost overflowing. What happened? Sean was full of doubts. He clearly had no intention of flirting with her, and he kept a distance from her, but it was still difficult to stop Gwen's approach. Could it be that the system has incidentally increased his charm value, allowing girls to take the initiative to throw themselves into his arms? What a distress. The young boy looked up at the ceiling with a cheerful smile on his face. When Sean returned to school, he really enjoyed the treatment of a celebrity. Not only was he invited by the school to give a speech, but he also won the annual scholarship without any pressure, although this amount of money is nothing to him now. But this feeling of pretending to be a super academic is simply not very satisfying. The life of Dr. Connors also changed. Dr. Connors, who was obsessed with scientific research, was ridiculed by his colleagues in the industry because of his cross-species genetic research that no one was optimistic about. He could only live in New York. State universities deigned to teach. With the success of the press conference held by Osborne Industries, the name Curt Connors was suddenly remembered by the academic community, but this time no one continued to laugh at the one-armed middle-aged man. After all, the mainstream public opinion at that time was full of praise. If you jump out at this time, you will inevitably become a target of criticism. Thank you, Sean. ALZ112 was originally your personal invention and has nothing to do with me. Privately, Dr. Connors found Sean and sincerely thanked him. This one-armed middle-aged man who is not good at words is sincerely grateful to Sean. Although he is young, he has helped him many times. Whether it was completing the evolution formula of the decay rate algorithm or regaining the right to use the research laboratory from Osborne Industries, this young boy with outstanding talent can be said to have changed his life. You deserve it, Dr. Connors. ALZ112, like the decay rate algorithm, is not perfect. I have a lot of wonderful ideas in my head, but it would take a good enough scientist to perfect them, and you did it, so the honor should go to you. Sean certainly knows that ALZ112 from Rise of the Planet of the Apes is not perfect and has its own side effects. Over time, the human immune system will develop antibodies to recover from the disease, and the same in biological genes. Dr. Connors, who has been engaged in research work for many years, finally solved this problem after a period of repeated trials. This world has an extremely advanced scientific foundation, so Tony Stark can rely on his constantly evolving and transformed steel armor to fight against powerful beings like the Hulk and Thor. The power of technology is not inferior to that of magic and magic ability. Therefore, those scientists who occupy an important position in the future timeline are undoubtedly a precious resource with huge potential and available for Sean. Winning over Dr. Connors is only the first step, and there will be more important ones in the future. Characters, join this team. By the way, Doctor, you have to prepare something more formal. Before leaving, Sean suddenly turned around and said. Dr. Connors looked puzzled. He usually had almost no social activities, and sometimes even lived directly in the laboratory, so he didn't understand why Sean had to prepare his own formal clothes. According to Harry, you have become a candidate for the National Medal of Science, and you have the opportunity to be awarded the award by the president in person. For such an important occasion, you always have to dress more formally, right? Sean smiled brightly. In fact, the candidates included himself, but he declined this opportunity. It was not suitable to be too pushy at the moment. With Dr. Connors as a shield in front, it would be easier for him to do anything. Quote. Sean Cypers, the scientific genius of the new era. The second generation of Stark. In the office of the president of Osborne Industries, Harry smiled and handed Sean the latest magazine. This was an interview from Vanity Fair. As the new darling of the media, I don't know how many newspapers and magazines wanted to interview this new man. A rich young man from Jin Dynasty. After reaching a cooperation agreement with Harry, Sean received hundreds of millions of dollars in remuneration, as well as a share of Osborne Industries, so he can now be considered among the ranks of billionaires, but he is still far away from Tony Stark. At this level, there is still a long way to go. Stark too, haha, that's quite a high evaluation. Sean smiled slightly and looked at the magazine cover, with a young face in a straight suit and full of vigor and confidence. The external media always compared him to Tony. Stark made a comparison, but he didn't have many other ideas. I believe it won't be long before he meets that playboy with a genius mind, but having said that, based on Sean's long-standing interest in Stark Industries, the other person should be going to the front line in Afghanistan soon. Let's promote weapons. This is the beginning of all timelines, the birth of Iron Man, and then the Avengers appear and gather one by one, eventually forming the most powerful superhero group in the world. It's really interesting. This feeling of witnessing the growth of superheroes is really interesting. Sean turned to look at Harry. Due to the unprecedented success of the press conference, the young president's situation had improved a lot. At least the shareholders on the board of directors no longer clamored to split up and reorganize Osborne Industries, or packaged and sold to Wall Street bankers. Okay, let's get back to the topic. The FDA, Food and Drug Administration, application has been approved. The next step is the clinical trial stage. I believe ALZ-112 will be officially launched soon. Sean sat on the chair. ALZ-112 was just the first step in starting his own business. Dr. Connors' research was about to be successful, and he would be able to launch it at that time. He would gain a firm foothold in the biopharmaceutical industry and establish his own laboratory, and then aggressively collect and recruit scientific talents to transform these resources with huge potential into power. He has not forgotten that there is still a huge treasure trove of mutants waiting for him, but for the time being, Sean has not figured out how to deal with the most powerful mind controller in the world. Osborne Industries has been shortening the steps as quickly as possible. Did you know, Sean, after the press conference, the company's stock price immediately stopped its downward trend and began to soar. According to the company's internal evaluation, referring to the previous launch of similar drugs, the subsequent sales are expected to reach $4 billion. Harry said happily. The heavy pressure that had been weighing on his shoulders could finally be let go. Osborne Industries had gained a chance to breathe. The business empire that his father had worked hard to build all his life would not be in his hands after all. Collapse. Sean's eyes blinked. He was not as excited as Harry. He had expected such a rich reward. Anyway, this was just the beginning. Remember to apply for a patent from the PTO. Sean sat in Harry's office for a while. The two discussed the current review process of ALZ-112 and the general situation after it was launched, and then prepared to leave. A phase of work was over. After finishing what he was doing, Sean, who was walking on the street, suddenly thought that it was time for him to go to Hell's Kitchen. After all, he could still brush up the system points. Daredevil, Punisher, Iron Fist, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones. These are a lot of points. Sean couldn't help but feel excited when he thought of the dazzling array of props and items in the mall. In that case, let's start with these street heroes. Night shrouds New York, and the city's gorgeous lights glow with exuberant vitality. The rich are indulged in a luxurious life, while the people in the slums enjoy the warmth of their families. Hell's Kitchen, the sinful place in New York. Even after Kingpin's death, this special area full of chaos and crime has not been calmed down as expected. The gangs, drug dealers, and street gangsters are like wildfires. Like grass, it didn't take long for it to reappear, quietly eroding every block. Matt Murdock is sitting in a law office where he is alone. His developed keen senses allow him to hear various sounds nearby. If he concentrates, he can even expand his range of perception to an entire block. What are you doing? Why, brother, Stay out of the way, or I'll blow your head off. Come on if you have the guts. Do you want to taste the pain? Matt tightened his grip on the document in his hand. He had given up his identity as Daredevil for a long time. Since the death of Kingpin, the blind lawyer has decided not to wear the Red Devil suit again. Perhaps his friends Foggy and the departure of his assistant Karen finally made him realize that violently attacking criminals is a temporary solution rather than a permanent solution. While Daredevil is punishing criminals, he is also breaking the law. Although he has made a decision in his heart, Matt still can't restrain the impulse in his heart whenever he hears that a crime has occurred. His hatred of evil makes him unable to sit back and ignore criminals and violent incidents. NYPD. Disperse. Stop. The arrival of the police calmed down a violent conflict that was about to happen. Matt nodded and took a long breath. Maybe this is the best solution. The appearance of Daredevil will only make things worse. Matt forced himself to suppress the impulsive emotions in his heart. With the fall of Kingpin, Hell's Kitchen at least regained its superficial calm. The blind lawyer no longer thought about it and concentrated on preparing the litigation documents that were waiting for him. Matt, who gave up his life as a vigilante as the Devil from Hell's Kitchen, now engages in charitable legal aid work, specifically serving civilians who cannot afford a lawyer. This is another way to fight crime. Frank, is that you? Matt frowned as he was sorting out the files. He seemed to hear a familiar sound of footsteps. Your ears are still so sharp, barrister. The tall, burly man climbed through the window from the fire escape and sat on the sofa very familiarly. Do you have any wine here? Whiskey and ice. Matt stood up and took out a bottle of beer from the refrigerator and threw it to Frank on the sofa. This tall man, known as the Punisher, caught the beer easily and accurately, unscrewed the cap and started drinking. Can you please go through the door next time? Don't open the window every time. Matt had some objections to Frank's way of entering the door. I'm not you, Matt. The entire New York Police Department is looking for me. Those police suspected that I killed Kingpin and listed me as the most wanted person. Frank drank the beer in one breath and inexplicably carried such a person on his back. Blame. This made him extremely angry. Matt shook his head, smiled, and said, actually, I thought you did it at first. Frank was originally a member of the Marine Corps. When he returned home from the Army, he witnessed the brutal murder of his family. Suffering great psychological stimulation, he began to single-handedly clean up the evil forces in Hell's Kitchen. It was in this process that he met Matt. The two initially had several fierce confrontations, and finally Daredevil, who understood the whole story, saved Frank, who was seriously injured, and even volunteered to become his defense lawyer. Although that guy's rough style was very similar to mine, he got the better of me before I could take action against Kingpin. Frank played with the gun in his hand. He is now very famous in Hell's Kitchen. Compared to Daredevil, who has disappeared, this cruel and extreme Punisher has been dedicated to fighting against the gangs. After calculating the time, Matt said, You won't come to me for no reason, Frank. What did you find out? Look at what you look like now, Matt Murdock, the righteous lawyer. Frank said in a mocking tone. He didn't expect that the other party would give up his identity as Daredevil. Do you remember what I told you before? A big conspiracy is being planned. The Kingpin is dead, but the Hand's power is growing day by day, and they secretly control a company called Midtown Circle Financial, and I found that there are many red ninjas stationed there, which is very unusual. Matt was silent for a moment. His girlfriend Erica was killed by the Hand. Those Japanese ninjas tried to make Erica into a powerful weapon called Black Sky. In the fierce pursuit and battle, Erica unfortunately died trying to save herself. This is the biggest pain in Matt's heart. It is precisely because of this that he made the decision to put down the Daredevil suit and helmet and choose to return to ordinary life. The Hand. I thought they had left Hell's Kitchen. Matt smiled bitterly, burying those painful memories in his heart. No, they just hid it quietly. They seemed to have been doing something secretly. Frank told the clues he had recently investigated. He hoped to get help from Matt and the elite ninjas who had received rigorous training from the Hand. It's really hard to deal with alone. What are you going to do? Matt asked. There is a Hellfire Club in Hell's Kitchen, where dragons and snakes are mixed together. It is the best place to collect intelligence. Frank showed an unfriendly smile, thinking that the way the Punisher collects intelligence is definitely not a polite visit. I have to go to court at 3 o'clock to defend a child who lost his legs. Well, I wish you good luck in your investigation. Matt stuffed the documents on the table into his briefcase and touched the blind stick next to him. You can stay at my house for a while, and remember to lock the windows before leaving. The security here is not very good. You don't want to care about such things anymore, right? Matt Murdock, are you really willing to forget your previous life and become a barrister who speaks out for justice and defends the poor? Frank stood up, with a hint of anger in his tone. He hoped that Matt could get back on his feet and continue to be the daredevil who fights crime. Hell's Kitchen needs such a person. Do you think the law can judge those evil people? I thought you had already seen clearly, Matt, that the law cannot punish those villains who do whatever they want. In Hell's Kitchen, the gang bosses go in and out of the police station as if they were at home. They are in prison. They still enjoy high-end red wine, beautiful prostitutes, and even the prison guards bow to them. These people have not received any punishment, and they will not repent to God, so I will show no mercy, because all these scum deserve to go to hell. Quote. Frank's voice was extremely cold, like a cold bullet, hitting Matt's heart. The blind lawyer had experienced constant hesitation and struggle, and the impulsive emotion in his heart surged up again. Frank, I'm sorry, I can't do it. After a long time, Matt gave his answer and walked out of the shabby apartment. Frank stood there and sighed. It seemed that he had to find another helper. Anyway, a group of new characters have recently emerged in Hell's Kitchen, including Harlem's black hero Luke Cage, private detective Jessica Jones. These people have extraordinary abilities. Anyway, let's go to the Hellfire Club tonight. I hope the boss is more knowledgeable and can give me a satisfactory answer. The Punisher, with a skull printed on his chest, rolled out of the window again, his burly back disappearing into the dim night. I think this is a misunderstanding, and Mr. Frank, I'm really not the owner of this club. Wesley raised his hands, trying to look non-threatening and well-behaved. He leaned against the leather sofa in the private room, with a 9mm Browning automatic pistol pressed against his forehead. As long as he held the gun, if that hand pulls the trigger just a little harder, the head of this hard-won personal assistant will explode like a watermelon. Just half an hour ago, this burly man with a strong physique rushed directly into the Hellfire Club. The gangsters and bodyguards had no power to resist in front of this terrifying killer known as the Punisher. By the time Wesley came out to inspect the situation, there were already people lying on the ground, and everyone was moaning in pain. They probably had their hands and feet broken, or a dozen broken ribs or something. Fortunately, the other person was still a little restrained. For a moment, I didn't go on a killing spree, otherwise this club would probably be filled with all kinds of severed human limbs. According to the Punisher's past behavior, most of the gangsters who dared to resist were shot in the head or had their throats cut with a tactical dagger. When it came to killing methods, the other side was clean and neat. So you can't give me any useful information about the hand. The Punisher, wearing his iconic costume, said indifferently that what the criminals in Hell's Kitchen are most afraid of is seeing a black t-shirt with a skull printed on the chest at night, because that means they have one foot inside hell. The hand has had several simple cooperations with Kingpin secretly before. Most of them were to acquire some real estate or old buildings. As for the purpose, it is unknown. By the way, they have always wanted to create something called Black. It's an empty weapon, so I keep selecting children from all over the world to use as containers. That's all I know. As a smart man, Wesley cooperated and told all the information he knew. The Punisher's illustrious reputation in Hell's Kitchen is more terrifying than the legend of the Red Devil. At least the latter will only beat you to death, half disabled, and then sent to the police station, while the former sends you directly to see God. Who is your boss? The Punisher put down his pistol. He had investigated this man named James Wesley. He had previously served as Kingpin's personal assistant. Later, Kingpin was attacked and killed. Wesley inherited all the Underworld Emperor's legacy, which made Frank sniff. There was a hint of something unusual, and it all seemed like a plan that had been arranged long ago. Frank is very interested in the mysterious boss behind Wesley, who may be the person who really killed Kingpin. To be honest, I really don't know who he is or what his name is. I don't know anything about the boss. He only left me a phone number. Wesley carefully took out his cell phone, and at the Punisher's signal, dialed his boss's number. Sean is personally teaching the chimpanzee named Caesar in the laboratory. Caesar, who was injected with ALZ-112, has obviously shown a learning ability and IQ that far exceeds that of his peers. Whether it is learning words or pictures, it can quickly master them. Even with constant training and teaching, it can gradually use simple gestures to communicate with people, which is beyond the scope of animals. In the words of Dr. Connors, Caesar is becoming more and more human, and even if he speaks one day, it will not be surprising at all. I always feel that you are doing something very dangerous. After Sean came out of the room, Connors had a trace of worry in his eyes. He had the keen intuition of an excellent scientist. What's wrong, doctor? Are you afraid of Caesar? A faint smile appeared on Sean's lips. Through a series of means, he had completely tied Dr. Connors to his chariot. Yes, Connors nodded. Through the thick glass window, he looked at the chimpanzee whose behavior was no different from that of humans. He said worriedly, "You are creating a new race, Sean. Caesar's learning ability is extremely amazing. He is constantly evolving, Sean. The cycle for learning various things is constantly shortening. What does this mean? This shows that Caesar's current development has not reached the limit, and it still has there is room for growth. What if one day it becomes the same as humans?" As a scientist, Connors felt the terrifying potential shown by Caesar. ALZ-112 was originally a new drug designed to treat brain degeneration, but if it did more than just that, once it was used on primates, it is equivalent to creating a whole new race. Sean couldn't help laughing after hearing this. What Dr. Connors was worried about was exactly what happened in the world of Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Since ALZ-112 was ineffective on the human body, scientists developed another ALZ-112 with a more powerful effect. 113 This drug not only stimulates the intelligence of orangutans, but is also a virus that is completely fatal to humans. Because of this, humans in that world were almost extinct, and the orangutans also got the opportunity to develop and form a brand new racial civilization. Doctor, nothing like what you imagined will happen. It is not that simple for a new race to develop. How long did it take for humans to evolve from the Stone Age of slash and burn farming to modern industrial civilization? There will only be one in the world. There is a Caesar. Sean dispelled Connor's worries. The reason why he trained and taught Caesar was just to raise him as an interesting pet. In the future, Sean will carry out more dangerous experiments, such as genetic research on mutants, or building super soldiers, or even a Hulk replication plan. These are all rough ideas that have been formed in his mind. No matter how much Caesar evolves, will he be more terrifying than those foreign beings and aliens? Don't let caution limit your imagination, Dr. Connors. Sean patted Connors on the shoulder and smiled kindly. Buzz buzz. Feeling the vibration in his pocket, Sean took out his phone and frowned when he saw the caller's number. Wesley would not contact him easily. Could it be that something big happened in Hell's Kitchen? Thinking of his unimplemented score-boosting plan, Sean couldn't help but feel a little confused. He answered the phone and heard Wesley's voice from the other side. "Boss, there is something that you may need to come over and handle in person." "Did someone put a gun to your head, Wesley? You sounded nervous." Sean frowned. He vaguely sensed that something was wrong. Wesley had always been steady in doing things and would never say such vague words. He must have been threatened in some way. "If you still want to keep this guy alive, get to the Hellfire Club within half an hour." A hoarse, deep voice came from the other end of the phone. After saying this, he simply cut off the call. Sean touched his chin. When did he provoke such an opponent? He has always maintained a low-key style, but it's really interesting that people still come to visit him. I made a list of the characters in Hell's Kitchen who have the ability to threaten Wesley. Daredevil is said to have disappeared for a while, and there has been no news about him. Jessica Jones is still working as her own private detective. Luke Cage is hanging around in Harlem. As for Iron Fist, which has not yet officially appeared, the Japanese ninjas from the hand should not attack Wesley. After all, they maintain a good cooperative relationship. After counting, there is only one Punisher left who uses brutal methods to punish criminals, and judging from his behavior when he hung up the phone just now, he does look a lot like the other person. Don't let the points that come to your door go to waste. Sean felt a slight excitement in his heart, as if the fighting instinct hidden in his body was gradually awakening. In the Hellfire Club, the Punisher who issued the threat calmly leaned on the sofa. The bottle of whiskey on the table had reached the bottom, the cigar box was also opened. The Browning automatic pistol was placed on the right-hand side, and its owner smoking and enjoying authentic Cuban cigars. You rich people. Even after drinking other people's wine and smoking high-end cigars, Frank still cursed without changing his expression. Wesley pretended not to hear, not daring to show the slightest anger. If he offended the other party, he might not be able to wait until the boss came over. Your boss sounds very young. How did he kill Kingpin? Set up a trap, or used heavy firepower? The Punisher seemed to be relaxed. In fact, if Wesley did anything unusual, he would be able to kill him. Within 2 seconds, shoot the opponent's head. Mr. Punisher, I really don't know much about my boss. He doesn't want to show up in person, so he supports me as his agent to handle various matters for him. Wesley smiled bitterly. He knew that the young boss didn't trust him, and the other party didn't care about loyalty. After all, as long as you pay enough chips, people's beliefs can change at any time. He seems to be a cautious guy. The Punisher asked no more questions. He was just a little curious about the person who killed Jin Bin. When did such a mysterious guy appear in Hell's Kitchen again? He was able to get rid of Kingpin and Bullseye, and supported the puppets to accept each other's property. After a series of actions, it didn't cause the slightest ripples, which surprised Frank. Wesley lowered his head slightly. In fact, he knew the identity of the young boss, but he just chose to hide it. When one's life is threatened, telling some insignificant information is forgivable, but if important information is leaked, it is undoubtedly a complete betrayal. The Punisher is certainly scary, but his boss is not a kind person to talk to. Kingpin, who once dominated Hell's Kitchen, fell easily, and Wesley didn't dare to have any thoughts of rebellion. As time passed by, the Punisher's eyes gradually became cold. He always kept his word. If Wesley's boss did not arrive within half an hour, then the other party would probably lose only one capable subordinate. The pointer was about to move to 12 o'clock. Suddenly, the lights in the private box went out, and the entire space fell into darkness. The Punisher immediately grasped the pistol, and his burly body turned directly over the sofa to find a suitable bunker. The fighting instincts he had trained for many years made him always vigilant. Since the mysterious guy hiding behind the scenes could quickly swallow up all the property left behind by Kingpin after killing him, it was enough to prove that he was not simple-minded. Therefore, the Punisher did not expect that the opponent would really come over alone. He had already made plans to deal with a group of gunmen and thugs, and had also planned an evacuation plan. Once he discovered that there were many enemies, he would immediately look for opportunities, escape. As a retired Marine, the Punisher doesn't think there is anything shameful in this. When he discovers that the enemy is powerful, he still rushes forward regardless. That is not called bravery, but stupidity. He is not a brash man with a brain full of muscles. On the contrary, in his burly body, there is a brain that can think calmly under any circumstances. The Hellfire Club was dark, as if someone had cut off the power supply. In the silent environment, the sound of tap-tat footsteps seemed particularly clear. The door to the private box was pushed open, and in the dark space with extremely low visibility, the Punisher raised the Browning automatic pistol in his hand. With a loud noise, firelight splashed, and bullets poured out. The person who pushed the door seemed to have expected it. He quickly stepped aside and disappeared like a ghost. The bullets missed and all hit the door frame, carving out a series of dense holes. The Punisher threw away the pistol with an empty magazine, took out the tactical dagger from his waist, and hunched over slightly, like a ferocious wild wolf waiting for an opportunity. A fierce gust of wind swept over his head. The Punisher quickly lowered his head to avoid the powerful and heavy whip leg. The sharp dagger drew a sharp blade from bottom to top. The opponent was obviously not a rookie, so he held his hand sideways. Holding the dagger's arm, his hands were like a noose, seizing the Punisher's weapon. So much strength. His arms were slightly numb, and the Punisher couldn't help but be surprised. His opponent was not tall and strong, but when they fought just now, his opponent used his strength to overwhelm him and directly remove the weapon in his hand. The Punisher, who had lost his combat dagger, suddenly closed the distance, raised his fist and punched the opponent in the face. It was obvious that he planned to adopt the tactics of close combat. He punched very fast, giving no time to react at all, as if to use this storm-like attack to knock your opponent to the ground. The man who broke in was not to be outdone at all. After blocking a heavy punch that hit his chest, he kept moving and quickly parried the attacks with his hands. Like an indestructible rock, he withstood the punishment head-on, or a ferocious and violent crazy attack. The two sides were completely like two humanoid fighting machines, punching like the wind, working tirelessly, abandoning all cumbersome fighting techniques, and engaging in fierce fighting without any tricks. Wesley, who was leaning on the sofa and did not dare to move at all. After witnessing the battle scene between the two people, he could only hide aside and tremble. At the same time, he sighed secretly in his heart, are these still human beings? Fall down. In the spacious private box, a loud shout suddenly broke out. During the violent and frequent collisions between the two sides, the Punisher finally seized the opportunity. Like a tiger descending a mountain, he pressed forward with a fierce and unrivaled momentum, and his right hand was like a giant. The axe struck down, and the fierce wind that hit his face left no doubt that even hard rocks could be broken in one blow. Weakness limits your imagination. Vaguely, the Punisher seemed to hear a low laugh, and a huge sense of danger came over his heart. The opponent he had been fighting with just now suddenly seemed to have transformed into a terrifying giant beast, with a surging momentum. If there is a wave, it seems that it will swallow him up in the next moment. The fatal blow that gathered all the strength of his body hit the opponent's arm hard, and a clear cracking sound was heard. The Punisher felt as if he had hit a hard steel plate, and the huge rebound force directly broke the bones of his hand. The opponent was unforgiving. His tall body was like a mountain peak, and he hit him at a very fast speed. The Punisher's 200-pound heavy body flew up into the air like a cannonball, and fell behind him. There was a dull thud on the wall. With a gentle snap of his fingers, the lights in the private box turned on again, and Sean stood in the center of the mess, surrounded by broken tables and chairs, flying wood chips, and scattered glass shards. It's just a few broken bones. For you, this should be a common occurrence. Looking at the Punisher who couldn't get up after struggling several times, Sean said in a relaxed tone. He was in a happy mood after completing a score-raising operation, so he didn't intend to let this street hero who showed no mercy to criminals pay compensation. The club's losses were incurred. There was no suspense about this battle from the beginning. Even though the Punisher, who retired from the Marine Corps, has been rigorously trained, he is familiar with special operations tactics such as individual soldiers and teams, and is proficient in combat, fighting, shooting, underwater operations, forced confessions, and intelligence collection and other skills, but he still can't escape the human realm. Against myself, whose strength, speed, and nerve reflexes are far superior to those of humans, it is equivalent to a low-level novice with a whiteboard. When encountering an advanced player in a magical outfit, even breaking through the defense is a problem. A non-human with the power to penetrate steel plates and the speed to catch up with a car, the Punisher will never be his opponent no matter how hard he trains. The threats that can pose to Sean now are the mutants who control supernatural powers, the alien gods of Asgard, and the alien beings who are born with powerful powers. Chapter 39. When Frank opened his eyes, he found that his hands were handcuffed to the chair, and his body could not move at all. The surroundings were dark and silent, and there was only a metal table and a burning lamp in front of him. Interrogation. As a former Marine, Frank was no stranger to this situation. He was caught by the enemy, and the next step was naturally to be tortured. A guy who killed Kingpin and Bullseye and plundered all the inheritance of a New York gangster, how could he expect that the other party would be a kind person? Frank sneered in his heart. He had experienced the most desperate pain in the world, how could he succumb to the torture of punishment? It would be ridiculous if the other party thought he could get any news or intelligence from his mouth. There was a patter of footsteps, and someone pushed the door open and walked in. He pulled out a chair and sat down. The other person's face was hidden in the thick darkness, and his specific appearance could not be seen clearly. "Hello, Mr. Frank Custer." The visitor greeted, and then continued, "We can finally sit down and talk. To be honest, your temper is not very good, and you have to use this method. Communicate normally." "Who are you?" asked the burly man known as the Punisher. "Oh, The same cliché question. I am the person who killed Kingpin, the culprit who made you take the blame, the boss behind the Hellfire Club, and a law-abiding citizen of New York. Kill people, control gangs. You are really a good citizen who abides by the law. Frank showed a sarcastic smile on his face, not afraid of angering the other party at all. To Frank's surprise, the other party did not seem to be angry. Instead, he laughed softly and said, "From what standpoint did you say this, Mr. Frank?" What kind of person Kingpin was, I guess it doesn't need to be elaborated. Why can you call yourself a hero who fights criminals, punishes rape and eliminates evil by eradicating gangsters with cruel and bloody methods? But I just got rid of one for the citizens of New York. The gang boss became a murderer. Mr. Frank, you are called the Punisher by Hell's Kitchen, and your hands are probably stained with more blood than I know. The man sitting in the darkness had a touch of ridicule in his tone, but Frank was speechless and didn't know how to argue. In fact, besides killing Kingpin, Frank seemed to have no other criminal deeds. What do you want from me? Frank had to change the subject. The other party tapped his fingers on the table, seeming to be thinking, and said after a while, "Actually, I don't want to get anything from you at all. Mr. Frank, you broke into my club like a thug and injured me. The people under my command then threatened Wesley. In order not to lose a capable assistant, I got into a fight with you. And now you're asking me, what do I want from you? Frank Custer, does your family have a history of mental illness?" The Punisher, who had always been decisive in killing and telling the truth, turned red in the face, veins popped out on his thick arms, and the anger in his heart was burning like a flame. "Okay, I take back my last sentence, let's have a good talk next, Mr. Punisher." The man restrained his joking frivolous tone and turned serious. "I know everything about your experience. Frank Custer, a former elite soldier of the U.S. Marine Corps, witnessed his family being killed by gangs after retiring, so he began to have a passion for Hell's Kitchen. The gangs launched a revenge, during which they clashed with Daredevil, and were later arrested by the police. As Daredevil, Matt Murdock served as your defense lawyer, but you were still sent to prison. Quote, "It didn't take long for you to escape from prison. Of course you couldn't be willing to be trapped in prison after carrying the blood feud of your family. You killed 24 people. They were all villains bribed by gangs and were ready to kill you in prison. These people paid the price with their lives because of the miscalculation of your danger. After diligent investigation, you discovered the real murderer who caused the tragic murder of your family. The drug dealer leader, Blacksmith, in Hell's Kitchen was also your former commander in the Marine Corps. This officer Ray Shunovo has been secretly involved in the drug smuggling business. It was him who caused the tragic death of your family. One shot. After blowing this officer's head, you called yourself the Punisher, and began your great cause of fighting criminals and eradicating evil. Is there anything else you would like to add, Mr. Frank?" Frank couldn't help but be speechless when he heard the other party tell his story one by one. Those painful and bloody memories came to his mind again. Behind the title of Punisher, there was a painful soul that could not get relief. Only by continuously eradicating those gangster forces and making the villains and thugs get the punishment they deserve can Frank, who has lost hope in life, find some comfort in his heart. "Who are you?" Frank's eyes were like sharp swords, trying to pierce the darkness and see the other person's true face. "You can call me King, because before long, I will become the new king of Hell's Kitchen." The man's calm voice was full of confidence, as if he was just stating a simple fact. "Do you want to become the second Kingpin?" Frank frowned. If the other party had such a purpose, then another bloody storm would start in Hell's Kitchen. Haha, Kingpin was just a loser. A rule based on violence and fear can never last long. The man sat in the darkness, a smile escaped from the corner of his mouth. Hell's Kitchen is full of drugs, prostitutes, criminals, and gangs. There is no law or justice here. Can street heroes like you eradicate the source of evil? Using violence to maintain law and order can only treat the symptoms but not the root cause. It is destined to be a road with no end in sight. In this regard, a guy named Bruce Wayne summed up this lesson in a personal way. "Okay, let's talk about the hand first. I heard Wesley said you were investigating the hand." Sean didn't want to dwell too much on the topic of violence and vigilantes, and instead asked about the hand. "Things come up. Frank, who was initially prepared not to reveal any information, thought for a moment and finally revealed the information he knew. The other party did not seem to be the evil criminal he expected, but rather he spoke with a contemptuous attitude towards the gangster forces. Looks like the hand is going to make big news. The man in the dark let out an unexplained laugh. It seemed that he could use his hand to gather the street heroes of Hell's Kitchen together. This would be convenient for him to gain points and save him from searching for them one by one. Goodbye, Mr. Frank, it was a nice conversation. Sean stood up and opened the door to leave. Silence returned to the dark space, leaving only Frank's heavy breathing. Boss, what are you going to do? Wesley, who was waiting outside, glanced at the iron door of the room and asked, keep it closed, or pour it into a cement pillar and throw it to the bottom of the Hudson River. After completing the interrogation, Sean was speechless for a while. He patted his subordinate on the shoulder and said seriously, I say Wesley, don't put Kingpin's stuff here. Fighting, killing, etc., isn't it too much? Okay, we are all law-abiding citizens of New York, what good does killing the Punisher do to us? Keep him locked up. Anyway, with his ability, he should be able to escape on his own soon. Kill the Punisher and let him gather the street heroes of Hell's Kitchen. There was a cold light in Sean's eyes. He knew the plans of the hand very clearly. He would definitely have conflicts with these street heroes in the future. It seemed like another grand hunting activity. And all I have to do is wait patiently, be good at finding the right moment, and make sure nothing goes wrong before taking action. These are the excellent qualities a hunter should possess. After reaching a cooperation with Osborne Industries, everything slowly got on the right track. Sean took a solid first step towards success. With Dr. Connors's repeated insistence, he got rid of the intern and experiment. As an assistant, he officially became a partner of the laboratory. After the new drug is launched, Sean will give up the laboratory of the State University of New York. The scientific research facilities and research environment here can no longer satisfy him. It is too crude and simple for the rapidly growing research team. Sean and Connors have found a new location for the laboratory in the suburbs of northern Long Island, and have begun to break ground. The land is located on the East Coast. It was originally used to build high-end villa areas, and the greening and living facilities have been the construction was in good condition. Under Wesley's secret operation and through some government connections, he obtained this piece of land full of appreciation potential at a very low price. I believe that it won't be long before the new laboratory is completely completed and ready for initial use. By then, Sean will have his first business and will no longer be an unknown person. When Sean returned home, he saw Mindy packing things in her room. Those cute Tusky dolls filled 2 large boxes, as well as a lot of clothes and her own personal collection, such as dozens of beautiful sharp butterflies. The knives are probably birthday gifts from little Loli's father, and there is also a delicate pistol that has been blued and polished. Even the grip is made of walnut. It looks more like a weapon than a weapon. It is a collectible handicraft. It seems like you have more stuff than me. I remember when you moved in, you only had a small backpack. Sean looked at the cardboard boxes stacked up like a hill and couldn't help but feel speechless. These are my most precious collections. Teacher Jenny said that in the future, I want to be an elegant woman with a refined life and full of style. An otaku like you who only has some comic books and robot models will not understand. Mindy glanced at Sean with disdain, then shook her head, with a look of sadness on her face that said, my life is too far away from yours. Bang bang bang. Sean, whose face was full of black lines, grabbed the blonde little Lolita and gave him a crackling violent punishment. Mindy McCready, you have been eroded by the evil capitalism. In order to save your young and fragile heart, you will wash all the dishes next week. The little Loli, who was hurt a lot in her heart, glared at Sean who was humming a little tune with evil eyes. Seeing that he usually gave her pocket money and worked hard to wash dishes and cook, she temporarily pardoned this rudeness. Behavior. After abusing Sean 10,000 times in her little head, Mindy regained a smile on her face and happily organized her collection. They were preparing for a big move. Sean, who had entered the ranks of the rich, continued to live in this house. The old apartment was not suitable. Harry Osborne recommended a reliable intermediary. With the introduction, Sean bought a luxury apartment in Manhattan. All the procedures have been completed and now getting ready to move in. After packing up, Mindy held Sean's hand and looked at the empty room. The little loli pursed her lips and said, "Do you really want to move? I think it's good to live here. There are comic shops nearby and delicious and cheap Burger King. Do they also have these in Manhattan?" Sean rubbed Mindy's little head and said softly, "There will be them all. There will be bigger comic shops there, as well as ice cream shops with rich flavors, and fun amusement parks. We live in a bigger place than here, house." Mindy nodded with bright eyes. All the unhappiness just now was forgotten. She put her little hand into Sean's palm with a bright smile on her face. After losing her father, the little Lolita, the blank space in her heart has long been filled by Sean. Two equally lonely people living together made Mindy feel the concept and warmth of family for the first time. "Then will we always live together in the future?" Mindy asked, raising her head. "Yes." Sean smiled slightly. Maybe it was the right decision to pick up this little loli. It would be too lonely to work hard alone in this cold world. After loading the packed cardboard boxes into the newly purchased car, Sean took Mindy to close the door of the apartment and took one last look at the place where he once lived. This was the starting point for him to take the first step in his life as a drug lord. Frank D'Amico, Kingpin, Green Goblin, these powerful characters fell at his feet one after another. They were like springboards, helping Sean reach a higher peak. "Say goodbye to the past, Mindy." Sean pulled the little loli, and the two figures, one big and one small, looked at each other and smiled, then turned and left. The afterglow of the setting sun gradually sank into the horizon, and the night came slowly covered with gauze. While Sean was busy moving into his new home, a helicopter stirred up the airflow on the private helipad of the Rand Group and landed slowly in the open space, on the platform. A young man with brown curly hair stepped off the helicopter, followed by a black-haired woman carrying a suitcase. They looked at the brightly lit New York, with relaxed looks in their eyes. "I have a very strange feeling coming back to this city," the young man said with emotion. The last time he came to New York was to regain control of the family business from his enemies. This well-traveled young man is named Danny Rand. He was involved in a plane crash while traveling with his parents many years ago. After his parents died, he was adopted by monks from the East. He became a member of the mysterious organization, Kunlun, and accepted after decades of rigorous training. Danny earned the title of Iron Fist, the defender of Kunlun. "People from the Hand told me that there was going to be a war in New York, so I returned to this city again." Danny looked at his girlfriend beside him, his eyes flickering, as if he was recalling something. "I don't know what the Hand is planning. There is no conspiracy, but those people destroyed the only holy place that can bring me peace. Colleen, I will find those people one by one. I trust you." The black-haired woman held Danny's hand tightly. The two were about to leave the tarmac when a violent shaking came over them. The noisy sounds merged into huge waves. The brightly lit high-rise buildings not far away seemed to have encountered a big wave. Like a power outage in the area, lights went out one after another, and a huge crack visible to the naked eye opened on the empty tarmac. Danny grabbed his girlfriend Colleen and tried his best to steady his shaking body. Earthquake. Danny looked at the darkened neighborhood and wondered. The entire Hell's Kitchen was shaken violently, as if a shallow earthquake had occurred. Cars parked on the street sounded piercing sirens. Groups of panicked people poured out of apartments and buildings. Chaos spread like a wave. Even if the police department is determined to maintain order, it has little effect. The earthquake was centered in Hell's Kitchen and spread to other neighborhoods, whether it was Matt Murdock who gave up his identity as Daredevil, Jessica Jones who was pursuing a missing case, and Jessica Jones who had just been released from prison. Luke Cage, these street heroes living in Hell's Kitchen, all felt this violent shock. At this time, the Punisher, who had finally escaped from Wesley's hands, was being hunted by a group of hand ninjas. Frank, covered in blood, tried to use the complex terrain and buildings of Hell's Kitchen to get rid of the Hand who were following closely behind him. Ninja, he didn't expect that this mysterious organization hidden in Hell's Kitchen would plot such an amazing conspiracy. This terrible news must be conveyed to Matt. A war is about to start in Hell's Kitchen. He cannot stop it by himself. The group of people must be brought together to fight against the Hand. Hellfire Club. In the private box on the top floor, Sean was sitting on the sofa, soothing music was wafting through the space, and high-end red wine and a cigar box were placed on the table. Even though he knew that he was not interested in these, Wesley was still ready. All in all, I have to say that this Kingpin's personal assistant is really a cautious and smart man. Are you worried that you still remember the last time the Punisher invaded? So you can't wait to show yourself loyal? Sean smiled softly. He didn't care about loyalty at all. It was just like the integrity of a gangster. It could be betrayed easily. As long as the person in charge remained strong, then the people below would naturally not dare to have selfish motives. Wesley's loyalty to him was originally based on his own strong strength. Boss. Wesley opened the door and came in. He did not sit down directly. Instead, he stood there and reported the intelligence information he had learned one by one. I found it out. There was a shallow earthquake in Hell's Kitchen yesterday. The specific cause is not yet known. But one thing is certain, it should be related to the Hand Club. The center of the earthquake was the Midtown Circle Financial Company, which radiated to the surrounding neighborhoods. It was a company under the Hand Club, and it had cooperated with Kingpin before. Sean nodded, very satisfied with Wesley's ability. In 2 hours, you found out everything I wanted to know, which is very good. Wesley said modestly. Hellfire Club is the largest intelligence gathering center in Hell's Kitchen. Brokers or middlemen who are involved in various gangs and criminal groups like to come here to do business. It is really simple to know some information. Sean leaned on the sofa and thought. The Hand was obviously going to make big news. The small earthquake yesterday was a sign of war. If the noise was so loud, wouldn't it be afraid of attracting the attention of S.H.I.E.L.D.? That special agency that is currently unknown should not be interested in the gang war in New York. The thoughtful black director is probably collecting information on various superpowers at this time. A group of uncontrolled mutants is enough if it gives the other party a headache. Why would he set his sights on Hell's Kitchen? What's going on with those people I asked you to pay attention to recently? Sean wanted to know what those street heroes living in Hell's Kitchen were doing at this time. Wesley considered the words for a moment before speaking slowly. Matt Murdock, the blind lawyer, is engaged in charitable legal aid work. There is nothing unusual. Ms. Jessica Jones, who is currently investigating a case of a missing architect, and Luke Cage, who was just released from prison, was involved in the mysterious death of many black people. As for the Danny Rand you are talking about, he just arrived yesterday, New York. Well done, Wesley. Keep paying attention and be careful not to get caught. Those guys are not ordinary people. Sean looked at Wesley, who had always maintained a respectful attitude, with a look of appreciation in his eyes. No wonder the former underworld emperor Kingpin valued and trusted him so much. He had a subordinate who could handle all the trivial matters for you. It feels really good. You don't need to do everything yourself. You just need to grasp the general direction, and you can leave other things to the people below. Boss, I discovered that the people in the Hand are also paying close attention to Danny Rand. Wesley said another noteworthy news. That group of people were planning on Danny Rand. This young rich man who disappeared for more than 10 years and returned to New York again to inherit the family business has a very special identity. Sean smiled lightly. Danny Rand is a key figure in the implementation of the Hand's plan, so he cannot be ignored. Facing Wesley's puzzled gaze, Sean said without hesitation. When Danny Rand was a child, he was involved in an air crash on a plane with his father. After surviving by chance, he was adopted by an Eastern monk and joined the Kunlun, and later even won the title of Immortal Iron Fist, and became the defender of Kunlun. Kunlun. This was the first time Wesley heard this word. Even though he had conducted a comprehensive investigation on Danny Rand, he didn't know that the other party had such a secret past. A mysterious city located in the Himalayas. It is said to exist in another dimension. The monks living there believe that human beings contain Qi, which is the power of life itself. They hope to find ways to practice and control it, to strengthen themselves, but among these 5 people emerged 5 heretics, people with evil thoughts. These 5 people long for eternal life, to be able to continuously regenerate, and to get rid of the fear caused by death. The elders of Kunlun thought that this was a case of obsession, so, like Lucifer from heaven, those 5 people who disagreed were expelled. These 5 people became the 5 fingers of the Hand. They used certain items stolen from Kunlun to survive for centuries. Some of them you still know, such as Madame Gao, who controlled the drug business in Hell's Kitchen. She is one of the 5 leaders of the Hand. There was a look of shock on Wesley's face. If these words hadn't come from Sean's mouth, he would have thought he was listening to some third-rate novel. The Hand who had worked with Kingpin secretly had such a secret origin. The other 4 people have different identities, such as African warlords, arms smugglers, and even the controllers of large conglomerates. Each of the 5 fingers has their own territory, and they have now come to New York. Wesley smiled bitterly and said, "Boss, if you become an intelligence broker, you will definitely be the top one." Sean smiled slightly. Foreknowledge is probably the biggest advantage of time travelers. Before the trajectory of the timeline is completely disrupted by his butterfly, he must work harder to earn huge profits, just like Frank Darwin before. Like Kingpin, Miko will become his next springboard with the Hand. This mysterious organization with power all over the world has become the prey in Sean's eyes. The boss wants to take action against the Hand. Wesley's mind was spinning quickly. Sean knew so much about the Hand and allowed himself to secretly follow the street heroes of Hell's Kitchen. These were definitely not unintentional actions. There is a saying that it is the enemy who knows himself best. Since this unpredictable young boss knows so much about the origins and plans of the Hand, he must want to attack this mysterious organization entrenched in Hell's Kitchen. I remember telling you a long time ago that one day I will kick out the Hand, the Russians, and the Mexican drug cartel. Sean looked at Wes with a faint smile on his lips. "Lee, Emperor of Hell's Kitchen, this is my promise to you." Even with Wesley's status, he couldn't help but feel excited when he heard Sean say these words himself. He looked at the calm young boss and said sincerely, "Thank you, boss. You do beautiful things, so you should be rewarded. Wesley, don't limit your sights to Hell's Kitchen. The future prospects are very broad. There are many things in this world that you can't imagine." Sean stood up and patted his capable man on the shoulder before leaving, saying, "Keep an eye on the Hand and report any news to me at any time." The tall figure opened the door and walked out. The loud heavy metal music and the men and women swaying wildly drowned Sean in the crowd. When the bloody Punisher broke open the window of his house and came in, Matt, who was sitting on the sofa, couldn't help but sigh. Why did he always have to climb through the window when he said he would go through the front door? Can you not? Matt, who smelled the pungent smell of blood, couldn't help but change his face. He swallowed the teasing words he wanted to say. He quickly moved the panting Punisher to the sofa, and then dug out a hemostatic bandage from home, and portable medical kits for sterilizing iodine. In the past, Matt would wear the Red Devils jersey and patrol around Hell's Kitchen every night, looking for traces of criminal gangsters and street thugs. At that time, injuries were a common occurrence for him. Although his eyes are invisible, Matt has a more developed super sense than ordinary people. The Punisher's body is almost covered with stab wounds. The long and narrow wounds are crisscrossed, and the blood is soaked in the Black Skull t-shirt. When will Hell's Kitchen appear again? A master of using cold weapons. With doubts in his heart, Matt treated the wounds of the nearly comatose Punisher and performed a simple bandage. He had already decided to give up his identity as Daredevil and say goodbye to his previous life, but he and the Punisher were once on the same side. Partners on the same front, they also hate crime and hope to use their own power to change Hell's Kitchen, but the Punisher is angry because of the loss of his family, while he is motivated by his inner sense of justice. Matt, I don't know how long it took. The Punisher opened his eyes, and his consciousness gradually woke up from his drowsiness. He had at least a dozen wounds all over his body, and he had lost a lot of blood. If he hadn't relied on his strong physique to hold on, he would have been sent to the hospital long ago. The morgue. I don't want to know those things about the criminal group, Frank. It's hard for me to live a peaceful life and forget the identity of Daredevil. The reason why I took you in and helped you treat your wounds instead of sending you directly to police station or hospital, just because we were friends once, so don't involve me in those sinful whirlpools again. Matt sat in the dark, as if he knew what the Punisher was going to say. He didn't want to be sucked into those huge vortexes of filth and sin. Hell's Kitchen had always been like this. He once felt that Kingpin was the culprit of all this, but the Underworld Emperor fell, but the criminal activities did not decrease, but became more intense. The gangs fought like wild dogs to compete for territory. Matt, the anger in your heart has really disappeared. The Punisher, who was lying on the sofa, struggled to get up, and his eyes that were always full of anger looked directly at the figure in the darkness. Your father is called the Fire Boxer, Jack Murdoch. In order to make a living, he had to fight boxing matches for gang leaders. This kind of secretly manipulated matches sometimes required your father to fight fake matches to help the gangs gain greater profits. That time you wanted to watch your father's game, so he ignored the gang's orders and won the game, but the result? Shut up, Frank, Matt yelled with suppressed anger. And he was killed by a gangster and died in an alley. The law you believe in did not bring the murderer to justice, because the fool bribed the police, threatened the jury, and even if the evidence was conclusive, he could still, after killing someone, continue to get away with it. When the law fails to seek justice for people, we take matters into our own hands. Isn't that why you turned into Daredevil? Why are you backing down like a coward now? Not to be outdone, the Punisher responded, his deep and hoarse voice containing endless pain and anger. He hated those criminals and wished to send them all to hell. I'm different from you, Matt muttered as if he suddenly lost his strength. He once tried to use his ability to maintain justice, so he lost his lover. Erica was killed by the Hand. His friend Fergie left the law firm and drifted away from him. Karen, who was by his side, also chose to leave. Putting on the mask of Daredevil meant shouldering heavy responsibilities and costs. Matt felt tired and could no longer go on. Erica is still alive. Looking at the decadent Matt, the Punisher told the news. She hangs out with the Hand and obeys the orders of a woman. And she is stronger than before. Even I am no match for her. The Hand's letter stabbed Erica with a knife, and she fell into my arms. I buried her with the stickman. But now you are telling me that Erica is still alive, and you are planning to kill her. Will the Hands stay together? There was a trace of anger in Matt's voice. Watching his lover die in his arms with his own eyes was an eternal pain in his heart. Frank, although we are friends, don't make fun of Erica. You think I'm lying to you. All the wounds on my body were caused by your dear Erica with a Japanese samurai sword. She is no longer the person you remember, Matt, as the Hand called them. She is the Black Sky, and her body has been taken over by another existence, turning her into a cold-blooded and ruthless killing machine. The Punisher stood up unsteadily, took out a bottle of beer from the refrigerator, and poured the cold liquid into his throat, making the strong man covered with bandages calm down a little. Matt, the Hand is planning a huge conspiracy. There is a big hole under their new position, Midtown Circle Financial Company. The earthquake in Hell's Kitchen was caused by those from the Hand. If they continue to let them go, I don't know what terrible consequences it will lead to. A war is coming, and we have to fight for Hell's Kitchen. The Punisher told Matt everything he knew. He hoped that his old friend could put on the Red Devil suit again, become Daredevil again, and work with him to stop the Hand's conspiracy. Put on that mask and join me in saving Hell's Kitchen and saving your Erica. Matt remained silent. He closed his empty eyes, and many memories that had been deliberately forgotten came to his mind like a tide. He grew up in an orphanage, was taught by a blind stickman, was admitted to Columbia University, and determined to become a good lawyer. Those scenes flashed by like a fleeting glimpse. After graduation, Matt understood that the law may be fair and selfless, but its enforcers may not be so. There is too much injustice and darkness in the world, and a blind lawyer alone cannot fight against those. Capitalists who can afford a whole team of lawyers cannot punish gang leaders who collude with the police. So he put on a mask, used his extraordinary super senses and the martial arts skills he learned from the stickman to transform into the Red Devil of Hell's Kitchen, specifically looking for trouble for those gangsters. Frank, maybe you are right. If you want to achieve peace, you must prepare to fight. Matt stood up from the darkness. He opened the partition in the living room, where there were red battle uniforms and belts. A mask with devil horns. Matt, who put on the Daredevil suit again, turned to the Punisher and said, "Do we have any other teammates? Just two people can't deal with the Hand." The Punisher, who was covered in white bandages, laughed, his hoarse voice sounding like metal friction. "Of course, you are not the only hero of Hell's Kitchen. Midtown Circle Financial Company, top floor conference room. Isn't the boss behind you going to come see me in person?" A middle-aged woman wearing a white shawl asked, her brows slightly furrowed, her face with fine wrinkles filled with the power of someone who has been in a position of power for a long time. This is not a good attitude when talking about business. How could the Hand cooperate with a mysterious person who doesn't even want to show his face? Wesley, who was in a neat suit, sat in the conference room with a polite smile on his face and said in a steady voice, "I can fully represent the boss's opinions, and we are very sincere. Please, Alexandra, a lady must believe this. What Wesley was facing was the head of the Midtown Circle Financial Company, a woman with a legendary life experience. This middle-aged woman named Alexandra had always been a member of New York's upper-class circles. A famous figure. It is said that he founded a huge real estate company from scratch. He has a wide range of businesses. However, what is incompatible with his huge career is his extremely low-key personal style. He rarely appears in public, even at social gatherings. They rarely participate. Of course, what Wesley knew was not just superficial information. This middle-aged woman who had earned a huge net worth in less than a few decades was actually one of the 5 leaders of the Hand. The mysterious organization, Kunlun, in the East has devoted its life to pursuing the illusory goal of eternal life. The boss behind you is really arrogant. When Jin Bin cooperated with us, he didn't even dare to sit behind the scenes and direct everything remotely. Alexandra looked cold, and she didn't care about this so-called cooperation. Don't care. Now, all the power of the Hand is invested in Danny Rand. As long as he captures the last guardian of Kunlun and uses the power of the opponent's immortal iron fist to break the underground door, the hope of eternal life is close. In front of you. Compared to prolonging her own life, Alexandra doesn't care about a business no matter how huge the profit is. After all, what could be more precious than life? The reason why they were expelled from Kunlun back then was because of their infinite thirst for life. In fact, business is not important. There are countless business partners in the Hand. What my boss is looking forward to is to have a closer connection with the Hand, such as gaining access to your resources and even an intelligence network. Wesley sat upright and expressed his intention with a serious face. To be honest, before the two parties had established a completely trusting cooperative relationship, he rashly made such an unreasonable request. He was really afraid that he would be chopped down in anger. Die. However, the world is big and the boss is the biggest. No matter how rude the request is, Wesley, as an agent, can only faithfully implement it. This is one of the reasons why he became Kingpin's confidant. Haha, your boss is such an interesting person. Alexandra laughed perfunctorily before getting up and leaving. She didn't have time to waste on such insignificant matters. The guy who originally thought she could bring down Jin Bin would be a good partner no matter what, but now it seemed that he was just an arrogant person who didn't know the heights of the world. How about Danny Rand as a sincere gift? Wesley said calmly without saying anything to persuade him to stay. Seeing Alexandra stop and suddenly turn around to look at him, Wesley knew that the information provided by his boss was indeed correct. The guardian of Kunlun who had won the title of Immortal Iron Fist was indeed his opponent. The most important person. How much do you know? Alexandra asked calmly, with a hint of murderous intent in her eyes. Ms. Alexandra is the supreme leader of the 5 fingers of the Hand. Madame Gao, Sawanda, Murakami, and Botu have worked with us. They are all rushing to New York now. As for the Hand and Kunlun, I also know some of the connections. Wesley greeted the indifferent gaze of the supreme leader of the Hand with a calm expression. Knowing the other party's secret, he would either become a collaborator of the Hand on behalf of his boss, or he could simply evaporate and disappear from this world. Running errands for big shots is also a high-risk profession. Wesley smiled bitterly in his heart. Who is your boss? Alexandra finally began to face the mysterious man sitting behind the scenes. There were only a handful of people who knew the history of the Hand, and even fewer knew the identities of Kunlun and Danny Rand's Iron Fist. Rare. You can call him King, or Mr. K. Wesley reluctantly gave out his boss's pseudonym. He was used to his boss's bad taste. So what does he want? Everyone has their own interests, right? What does he want to get from the Hand? Alexandra became interested in this man. Black Sky. Wesley asked. My boss wants to know about the Hand's most powerful weapon. That's not a cheap thing sold in batches on the production line. Alexandra was a little surprised. She didn't expect that what the other party asked for would be this. What my boss pursues is strong individual strength, so he is very interested in Haikong. Wesley said with a faint smile. In return, he will leave Danny Rand and some other troublesome guys in your hands. Alexandra was silent for a while. She didn't have much time left. According to the medical examination report a few days ago, many organs in her body were on the verge of failure and her life was about to come to an end. The dragon bones, previously stolen from Kunlun, have been used up, and the last bit is used to resurrect the dead Erika and transform her into Black Sky. The death that has been gradually forgotten over the years is like an icy cold wind lingering on the body, and the huge fear invades the soul. This makes Alexandra lose her usual calmness and reason. In order to dig out a new dragon bone, she even destroyed the entire New York. If your boss can hand over Danny Rand to me, I can agree that he will become the sixth finger of the hand. Alexandra made the decision. Danny Rand is currently the opener. It is acceptable for the key person in that door to pay some price for this. Then, Wesley stood up and stretched out his hand, saying with a smile, "I wish us a happy cooperation. I hope I can meet your mysterious boss next time." Alexandra shook her hand with a meaningful look in her eyes. From this moment on, the hand will fully investigate the boss behind Wesley. A mysterious person who knows the origin and secrets of the hand makes Alexandra feel very uneasy. If time is not too tight, she will never agree to the other party's request for cooperation. Instead, she will send Black Sky. Erika to this unstable factor is completely eliminated. Watching Wesley leave, Alexandra had a gloomy look in her eyes. The cooperation was only temporary. After Danny Rand got it, she could open the underground door and dig out a new keel. The entire foundation of New York will sink, and countless people will be buried with it. The mysterious man who calls himself Mr. K may be the most suitable scapegoat. Alexandra stood in front of the huge floor-to-ceiling window, staring at the figure emerging on the transparent glass, and couldn't help but reveal a fanatical expression. The years had gradually aged her young body, and her elastic skin had lost its vitality, and her smooth skin had lost its vitality. His face was covered with fine wrinkles, and the organs in his body were beginning to fail. And all of this will change again as long as the dragon bone is obtained and developed into a potion. That magical substance has powerful life energy and can bring people back to life and restore youth. Alexandra looked at the steel jungle in the distance. Soon this prosperous city would cease to exist. Just like Pompeii, which once had a splendid civilization, it disappeared in a disaster. Hunting. Manhattan, Baxter Building. Sean pulled Mindy, who was carrying a small school bag, into the elevator and climbed all the way up until the number stopped at the 48th floor. Two figures, one large and one small, entered their new home under the guidance of the property manager who had been waiting for a long time. "Wow, this is great, Sean." Mindy opened her mouth and shouted excitedly. The first thing that caught the little loli's eye was the huge transparent floor-to-ceiling windows. Sunlight shone in from the outside and fell on the temporarily empty hall. Outside the window were densely packed high-rise buildings, standing on the earth like trees growing in a forest. When night falls, standing here and looking up, you can admire the nearby Park Avenue and Central Park, as well as the colorful lights, giving you the illusion of overlooking the entire New York. The simple European-style decoration and all-new furniture made Mindy extremely satisfied with this new home. She couldn't wait to rush into the room, ready to pick a bedroom that she liked. "The kid is a little noisy," Sean said with a smile, his eyes soft. Mindy lost her mother when she was very young, and later lived with her father. It must be said that the police officer failed very badly in the role of father. He completely raised his daughter as a killing machine, so that Mindy there is a fundamental lack of normal outlook on life and concepts of life, and they have developed the bad habit of resorting to violent means to resolve any disagreements, and can even take lives without blinking an eye. Fortunately, under Sean's deliberate guidance, this little blonde loli has gradually forgotten her previous life. Those bloody and painful past events have turned into faded old photos under the passage of time, and are sealed deep in her heart. Now his relationship with Mindy is somewhat similar to that of a family. Two equally lonely guys live together, giving each other and gaining the rare warmth in their hearts. It seems that you are quite satisfied with the Baxter Building. This building has a total of 50 floors. The residents are all New York's elites. By the way, Mr. Reed Richards lives above you. You are all talented people who are famous in New York. I believe there will be common topics, and Baxter Tower is honored to have you stay here. The property manager in a suit and tie said flatteringly that anyone who has read newspapers frequently in recent times will be familiar with Sean's face. After all, both entertainment newspapers and academic magazines are vying to report on this new owner. A young boy with dual auras is a wealthy man and a scientific genius. Reed Richards, Sean's eyes flickered. The genius known as the top 3 in the world lived above him. What an interesting coincidence. I will visit when I have time. I have been looking forward to meeting Dr. Richards. After seeing off the attentive property manager, Sean walked to the balcony. Mindy was busy decorating her room. The excitement of moving to a new home probably wouldn't pass soon, so Sean let her do what she wanted. There was a vibration in his pocket, and he took out his cell phone and answered the call from Wesley. How was the conversation? Sean asked. Everything is as you expected, boss. A respectful voice came from the other end of the phone. When I brought up the origins of Danny Rand and the hand, Alexandra's attitude immediately changed. She was very happy. I simply agree to your request. Alexandra doesn't have long to live. The shadow of death is imminent. No one can stay calm. Sean stood on the balcony, overlooking the city below. The traffic stretched like a long queue on the highway. Looking into the distance, he could vaguely see the winding Hudson River. While admiring the beautiful scenery of Manhattan from a height, he ordered Wesley, keep an eye on Danny Rand. I will go find him in person tonight. Boss, do you really want to help the Hand Club complete their plan? Wesley hesitated and asked. Sean told him the plan of the Hand. If Alexandra unearthed the huge keel buried underground, it was said that it would touch the foundation of the entire New York. By then, the city would sink and collapse, and no one would know how many people would die for this disaster. Although Wesley was not a kind person, he still had hesitation and intolerance in his heart as he watched millions of people die. How could I let these madmen who long for immortality destroy New York? I will hand over Danny Rand to Alexandra, but the Dragon Bone and the Hand are together, and it is not their turn to get involved. Sean laughed softly in the breeze and said, the Dragon Bones that can resurrect the dead and the Hand with power all over the world are his goals. As for Alexandra and other Hand leaders, there will naturally be people solve it for him. Those street heroes from Hell's Kitchen, they should be gathered together, right? The Punisher and Daredevil found some people, but they don't seem to get along well. Wesley used the resources at hand to track these target people. The Hand had found Danny Rand before, but he was the Iron Fist escaped. Those ninjas were no match for him, and Jessica Jones and Luke Cage also followed some clues and investigated the Hand Company. In short, everyone was on the same page. The children are all gathered together. Well, very good, I'm about to get a lot of points. Sean nodded with satisfaction, thinking of the dazzling redemption list in his mind. He couldn't help but feel excited. What are you talking about, boss? Wesley felt that his boss, who occasionally went off the rails, seemed to regard all this as a game. Well, I said you did a good job. You will soon be promoted and raised, and you will reach the pinnacle of your life. Keep up the good work, Wesley. Sean's perfunctory answer left Wesley speechless. He had never been able to figure out the character of his boss. Sometimes he seemed to be easy to talk to, and sometimes he was cold, decisive and merciless. Most of the time, he had a look on his face. With a sunny smile, he is like a gentle and cheerful boy next door, but when he meets an opponent or aims at a certain target, he will immediately exude a deep and dark aura. Because of this unpredictable sense of mystery, Wesley acted more cautiously and did not dare to have the slightest thought of betrayal. In his eyes, his young boss was even more powerful than the former underworld Emperor Kingpin. It came at a terrible time. After hanging up the phone, Sean moved his neck. A hint of excitement rose in his calm eyes. He felt the power rushing in his body. The warm sun's rays were like water, seeping into his body bit by bit, as if turning into electric current. Stimulates cells and tiny molecules in the body. I always feel like I'm going to get 5 kills tonight. Sean clenched his fists and grinned. Sean, how are you going to celebrate tonight? Let's go to Chinatown. Roast duck is much better than pizza. I've already prepared new clothes. Mindy walked out excitedly, wearing a dress like a little princess, which complimented this little girl. The little blonde loli is getting cuter and cuter. Well, if I told you that I have other activities tonight, you wouldn't blame me. Looking at Mindy, who was filled with joy, Sean said cautiously. The huge living room was quiet for a second, and then accompanied by the angry voice of, liar, the little blonde Lolita who was in a frenzy began to chase Sean crazily. 2 figures, one big and one small, chased around the new house. Half-hours later, it ended with Mindy slumped on the couch. Can I make it up for you next time? Sean sat on the sofa and stroked Mindy's little head. Well, only this time, and you are not allowed to touch my head. Mindy nestled on the soft sofa like a kitten. Remember, you must come back safely. At the beginning of the lanterns, Chinatown is crowded with people. Tourists and local residents coming and going form a crowded wave. A group of hurried eccentrics are like a small boat riding the wind and waves, bumping forward in the sea of people. Please give way. This group of people seemed to be being chased, almost arrogantly squeezing away the pedestrians around them. This behavior immediately aroused a burst of dissatisfied complaints. Several burly male tourists tried to stop them, but were stopped by a tall black man. The haired woman pushed it away easily, as if she were pushing aside a building block at will, without any effort. Oh, this woman is so strong. Seeing the group of people disappearing into the crowd, the tourists who were pushed away regained their composure. Boss, he is a third-generation immigrant from New York. He relied on the cooking skills he learned from his father to open a Chinese restaurant in Chinatown. Because of its authentic taste, it has always been popular among local overseas Chinese and other foreigners who love Chinese food culture. Welcome. Call it done. Boss, he sent the last batch of customers away and hung a "closed for business" sign at the door, which was the end of a busy day. If the business continues to be prosperous like this, then he will consider whether he should recruit more workers. Anyway, there are many young overseas Chinese in Chinatown who need jobs. Boom. The door to the restaurant was pushed open and then closed forcefully. The intrusion of a group of uninvited guests interrupted Boss He's beautiful vision. These people did not seem to be here to eat. They were a tall black-haired woman, a curly-haired young man in a suit, a tall and strong black man, and a burly man with weapons on his body. A big man, and a strange guy wearing a red devil suit. This strange combination made Boss He almost think he had encountered a group of crazy robbers, and he quickly raised his hands in fear. We are closed, Boss He said weakly when he saw that this group of people did not commit any robbery. A group of people broke in and ignored the restaurant owner's reminder. They looked out the window nervously. The tall black-haired woman directly lifted a heavy red lacquered long wooden cabinet with both hands and blocked it. Restaurant door. She's so strong. The man dressed like a red devil sighed. Sir, for your safety we need to make this place appear to be closed. The young man with brown curly hair explained to the boss in fluent Chinese, we will not hurt you, we are just borrowing this place temporarily. Children who have watched this drama, please ignore the sentence, fluent Chinese. A man in a red devil suit and a mask on his head closed the window. The hand may appear at any time. He was listening intently, using his super hearing to sense everything in the outside world. The group of ninjas did not seem to follow. Okay, now this restaurant belongs to us for the time being. After the curly-haired young man whispered a few words to the owner, the restaurant owner took the initiative to leave. What did you tell him? The black-haired woman asked curiously. I just gave him my credit card and promised to pay his rent for the next 6 months. The curly-haired young man said in a relaxed tone, my name is Danny Rand. Jessica, the black-haired woman said calmly, I know you too, the Punisher and Daredevil of Hell's Kitchen. I thought people had almost forgotten me after disappearing for so long. Daredevil said mockingly to himself. He originally went to find helpers with the Punisher, but he happened to bump into Jessica Jones who was chasing clues. Following this extraordinary female private detective, the three of them came to the Hands Position, Midtown Circle Financial Company. Iron Fist Danny Rand also broke into the Hands lair alone to investigate the mysterious disappearance of the black man Luke Cage in Harlem. At the same time, he also came to this real estate company controlled by the Hand, chasing the same man. The 5 targeted people gathered together under various coincidences and had a scuffle with the minions of the Hand. Several street heroes used their abilities to escape and hid in the densely populated Chinatown. I think now is the time to answer questions, Jessica said with a cold face. First of all, who can tell me who are those guys who are chasing us? The Hand, Danny Rand and the Punisher replied at the same time. After the two people looked at each other, Danny Rand continued, the Hand is an ancient criminal organization that has always existed. The people in this organization have fanatical ideologies, and every member is willing to defend their organization to the death. Belief. Sounds like a terrorist. Luke Cage frowned. He had lived in Harlem for so long and had never heard the name of this organization. No, the terrorists want to let the world know what they are doing, and this organization is more mysterious and evil, and their footprints are all over the world. Daredevil added that he had fought against the Hand before and knew this well. The organization is terrible. Then what do they want to do? Why are they recruiting young people in Harlem? Luke Cage asked doubtfully. The reason why he traced the real estate company was because recently, Harlem young black men continued to disappear or die. The purpose of the Hand is unclear at the moment, but obviously they came to New York for a reason. I feel like they want to find me. Danny Rand hesitated and revealed his identity. I am the immortal Iron Fist, the guardian of Kunlun. The scene suddenly fell into silence, whether it was the Punisher holding a 9mm Browning automatic pistol, Daredevil wearing a mask, Jessica who had always maintained a cold expression, and Luke Cage who was listening carefully. They all looked at Danny Rand with strange eyes. What did you take? Lithium, Jessica sneered mercilessly. Danny Rand wanted to defend, but was interrupted by the Punisher. Okay, shouldn't what we should be talking about now be what to do next? This burly man, who was like a mobile arsenal, held a Browning pistol and glanced at everyone with cold eyes. The Hand is planning an amazing conspiracy. There is a huge conspiracy in their lair, the bottom floor of the Midtown Circle Financial Company. I don't know what's inside the pothole, but I'm sure the earthquake a week ago was caused by them. Whether it's the disappearance and death of black people in Harlem that Luke mentioned, or the disappearance of the architect that Jessica investigated, these are all inseparable from the Hand. Now in front of us, there are nothing more than two Lou. Forget about this, walk out of this restaurant, and give up the previous investigation, or use your and my abilities to bring down this huge organization. Everyone was silent for a while. Everyone was thinking that this time was different from the previous crises they encountered. The opponent was not a gang leader or a street thug, but a well-organized behemoth. I want to protect the peace of Harlem. Luke Cage was the first to give the answer. He has always been a hero in Harlem. It seems that I am the first person to admit that I am a little powerless about this matter. This is beyond my ability. Jessica immediately gave the answer. She refused the invitation to form a team to beat the Hand. After experiencing a disaster, Jessica just wanted to be an ordinary person. She opened her own detective agency just to forget the bad life before, so no matter what, she did not want to be involved in this kind of fight against evil organizations again. Things to do. Oh, this is a great opportunity. I tried to fight against the Hand alone, but failed. Now we have so many people with extraordinary abilities, but you said you don't want to participate. Danny Rand shouted in disappointment. The reason why he returned to New York was to completely eradicate the Hand and let those people feel the pain of losing everything. Not everyone is willing to live this kind of life. When you choose to fight against the darkness, it means that you cannot take into account the friends and family around you. The people you want to protect may very well be in trouble because of your decision. And met with misfortune. Daredevil completely understands Jessica's psychology. He has also been through this stage before. If he hadn't learned the news about Erica, he might not have put on the suit again. Thank you, I think I should leave. Jessica gave Daredevil a rare smile, then stood up and prepared to leave. Daredevil was about to say something, but suddenly his expression became solemn. He listened carefully, and heard a slight sound of footsteps echoing on the street outside. The other person had a strong heartbeat, like a war drum beating, and burst out, "Dong dong." Even through his voice, Daredevil could feel the extremely strong vitality in this person. Crunch. The door blocked by the red lacquered wooden cabinet was easily pushed open, and a young man wearing a black mask walked in from the outside. He slowly glanced at the group of people who were waiting, and said with a smile, "Everyone is here. Then, let's go together." Boom. The first moment the young man appeared, the Punisher raised his hand and pulled the trigger. The Browning pistol burst into flames and made an astonishing sound. The bullet shattered the rear window and scattered glass fragments everywhere. The bloody scene that everyone expected did not appear. The young man wearing a black mask seemed to have already seen the Punisher's movements, and with precise steps, he dodged and hid in the darkness in advance. "Is this how you greet an old friend, Mr. Frank?" The young man's joking voice echoed in the restaurant. "It's a little rude." The Punisher's face was serious, and the skull on the black t-shirt became more and more eye-catching under the dim light. If you stand with the hand, then I will blow your head off with the next shot. The young man wandered in the shadows, his tall body blending into the dim environment. He stared at the nervous street heroes with cold and calm eyes, like a hunter waiting for the opportunity to hunt. Who is he? Danny Rand turned around and asked. You shouldn't have fired just now. What if the handle was attracted to you? A dangerous man. The Punisher tightened his grip on the Browning pistol. He ignored Danny Rand's complaints and instead looked at Daredevil. Can you determine his location? Daredevil pulled out 2 special short sticks. He nodded to the Punisher and gestured in a certain direction. The Punisher, who understood the meaning, immediately raised his hand. The black hole of the muzzle flame bloomed, and the powerful metal bullets were placed on the place. A screen in the restaurant was shattered into pieces, debris flying everywhere, and the moment the gunfire stopped, Daredevil suddenly rushed into the darkness like a cheetah that had been preparing for a long time. No one. Daredevil was surprised to find that there was no one behind the screen. He clearly heard the sound of a heartbeat. Following the direction of the sound source, he only found a small, delicate and strange instrument. Sometimes, the human ears, like the eyes, are most easily deceived. A low voice suddenly sounded, and Daredevil was startled. He twisted his body and swung his short stick. In the super senses that were different from ordinary people, a figure suddenly appeared clearly like a ghost. His heart beat violently like a war drum, as strong as the furnace-like breath of life, and all kinds of subtle information that humans can't feel, depict a strong and terrifying figure. The figure blocked the powerful and heavy short stick, and hit Daredevil's temple with a fierce punch. Feeling the whistling wind in the air, Matt, under the devil's mask, turned his head slightly and used another. The short stick was lifted backhand and struck at the opponent's jaw. If he were hit by this blow, the entire mandible would probably be broken. Lawyer Murdoch, you are out. There was a hint of smile in the deep voice. A warning sign suddenly arose in Daredevil's heart. The figure stretched out his hand like lightning and grasped the short stick that came from the bottom up. A powerful force flowed up the short stick to his arm, which had never been stronger in strength. Daredevil, who had lost to the others, groaned, and the weapon flew out of his hand. Then his chest seemed to be hit by a siege ram. The sound of his sternum breaking could be heard clearly. His whole body flew into the air, crushing a table. Fall to the ground. Boom, boom, boom. Continuous gunshots rang out, chasing the figure like a black ghost. After the Punisher emptied the magazine, he threw away the Browning pistol in his hand and took out a gobo fighting knife from the back of his waist. He knew the speed of that guy. Soon, the strength is inhuman. If it cannot restrict the opponent's movement ability, the firearm will be of little use. He passed out and his sternum was cracked. He needs to be sent to the hospital immediately. Jessica rushed to Daredevil's side. His injuries were somewhat serious. Deal with this annoying guy first. Luke Cage took off his coat, his muscles bulging like a humanoid beast. The Punisher clenched his fighting knife. He held his breath and carefully felt all the subtle movements in the darkness. The slightest sound of wind passed by, and the Punisher turned around suddenly, and a sharp sword light struck out. Sean, who was hiding in the shadows, was a little surprised. With his extraordinary reaction speed, he ducked sideways. The light of the knife grazed his body, and a heavy and powerful fist followed closely, hitting Sean's shoulder with a powerful blow. The punch seemed to hit a solid steel plate. Both men took a few steps back, and the Punisher let out a painful groan. Is this guy made of iron? Let me teach him a lesson. Luke Cage strode forward and pounced like a tiger. Compared with Daredevil and the Punisher, this strong black man's fighting skills can be said to be very rough, but he did not fall behind in the face of Sean. This black man who was born in Harlem has extraordinary strength and invulnerable skin. Even though he is not proficient in fighting, he relies on his strong defensive ability to fight with Sean continuously. Heavy punches hit Luke Cage's body from all directions, making a dull sound, like hitting a sandbag quickly. Luke Cage kept retreating. He tried to catch Sean, but whenever a fist was thrown, the opponent would always dodge first and then quickly fight back. After so many fights in Harlem, Luke Cage had never felt so aggrieved. He could only be beaten like a sandbag. He had no power to fight back. Even though he had the defense to withstand bullets, he could withstand the heavy punches that rained down on his body. He still felt a bit of pain. This is the first time I've met someone like you, with such a strong ability to withstand a beating. Are you interested in being my sparring partner? How about paying by the hour? Sean punched the opponent under the ribs with another punch. The energy in his body surged, like an electric current running through his body. A slight tremor spread throughout his body. He took a deep breath. The boiling energy in his body seemed to have found a breakthrough and poured into it. Luke Cage, who was bearing the violent blows from his rapidly swinging fist, suddenly retreated like a frightened beast. Click! A hard solid pillar was broken by Sean at the waist. He strode forward, grabbed the retreating Luke Cage with both hands, and his arms instantly exerted force to lift the heavy body of more than 400 pounds high. Throw it out the window. The car siren rang through the night sky. The strong black man broke the window and hit a black Chevrolet sedan. The roof collapsed directly, the glass window shattered and broke, and the automatic alarm was triggered, making a sharp scream. There are 3 left. Sean walked out of the darkness with light steps. I told you earlier, we can save some trouble if we go together. Jessica crossed her hands and kneaded them a few times. She had just watched this guy's fight and found that the opponent's strength, speed, muscle density and nerve reflexes were far beyond ordinary people, and he seemed to be proficient in fighting skills and fighting ability. Not bad. Overall, he is indeed a tough opponent. Danny Rand, who has been playing soy sauce, worked hard to enter a meditative state and tried to mobilize the chi in his body. Although he was awarded the title of Kunlun's Immortal Iron Fist, he was actually only a half-timer. He has not mastered the use of chi yet. Methods. Danny Rand, I'm actually very curious about Kunlun. Sean shook his neck, and the bones in his body twisted and made a slight sound. Danny Rand, who was adjusting his breathing, snorted coldly, a villain like you will never be worthy of stepping into Kunlun. What a righteous statement. Before the joking words could be finished, Sean shot out like a sharp arrow and rushed in front of Jessica. He whipped his leg like a tomahawk, tearing the air from the right side and pulling out Jessica's hands. Protecting her head to block the powerful blow, her black hair fluttered in the strong wind. This tall, indifferent woman exuded a wild aura, like a female leopard, unleashing a fierce offensive. The 2 men were fighting hand to hand, fists and bodies colliding with each other, making continuous dull sounds. The rapid and violent fighting style of both sides made it impossible for Danny Rand to intervene. The tables and chairs in the restaurant were like pieces of paper, falling between them. This terrifying guy was easily torn into pieces in the aftermath of the battle, and sawdust flew everywhere for a while, making it a mess. How long can you hold on? Jessica said coldly. After such a long battle, I don't believe you won't feel tired. As a beautiful lady, you shouldn't doubt a man's staying power. Sean pumped his fist quickly and let out a meaningful laugh. Jessica Jones, like Luke Cage, does not belong to the category of normal people. This black-haired woman who runs a private detective agency is not only extremely strong, but she can also fly. Her physical fitness is far beyond that of ordinary people. Among the small groups composed of people, they belong to the top combat power. Men who say they are durable are usually not very strong in reality. Jessica, who has a rather bold personality, retorted. Then give it a try. Maybe you will become obsessed with me later. Sean laughed in a low voice. During the fierce confrontation with Jessica, his expression suddenly changed. A golden fist struck quickly, and the surging power was accompanied by the whistling wind and hit directly in the face. With a bang, the iron fist carrying the rumbling wind came in an instant, hitting Sean's shoulder like a battering ram. The surging power was like a raging wave, knocking the young man who was unstoppable from the moment he appeared on the stage into the air. His tall and straight body he broke through the antique carved wooden door and fell heavily into the shadows. Danny Rand was also surprised by this ferocious blow. Although he was awarded the title of Immortal Iron Fist, as the guardian of Kunlun, in fact, he was not worthy of the title and could not skillfully control the chi in his body. Therefore, in the previous attack during the battle, he was never able to help. There was an unbelievable look in Jessica's eyes. She didn't expect that this reckless-looking kid could unexpectedly throw such a powerful punch. Without this guy's help, she would have been able to defeat Sean on her own. Not easy. Take advantage of this moment to get rid of him completely. The Punisher hidden aside is waiting for the opportunity. As a soldier, Frank has always been good at seizing the right opportunity. The Punisher was like a vigorous cheetah, quickly scurrying into the shadows. He knew how terrifying Sean was, and if he couldn't get rid of him at once, he might be the unlucky one. I think he's too nervous. Danny Rand shrugged. He didn't think that the man who suddenly appeared could get up immediately after receiving a heavy punch from him. Shaking his clenched fist, Danny Rand looked confident. Even though Sean had shown strong defensive power in the previous battle, this guardian from Kunlun had great confidence in his iron fist. Even the extremely hard steel body will be penetrated by his full blow just now. This is the power of Qi, inherited from Kunlun. Once mobilized and used, it is like a trump card, which can be used against everyone. He is a real warrior. Jessica shook her messy long black hair. Who would have thought that the most powerful street hero in Hell's Kitchen would almost be killed by that man tonight? Danny Rand glanced at the unconscious daredevil lying on the ground, then turned to look at Luke Cage, who was thrown out of the window, and said helplessly, I think we should call an ambulance, maybe one. Even the car was not enough. That guy was hit by my punch, and he probably won't be able to use a knife and fork again for the rest of his life. Oh, looks like I'm going to disappoint you. With a slight smile in his deep voice, Sean slowly walked out of the shadows. His tall body was like a mountain, showing a strong sense of oppression, especially when Jessica and Danny Rand saw each other. His right hand tightly strangled the Punisher's neck, and he was even more shocked. The burly man, who was 6 feet tall, was held in his hands like a chicken, and he kept breathing, ho-ho, with difficulty. Voice. The scene suddenly became quiet for a moment, and Danny Rand, who thought he had turned the situation around, looked ugly. Logically speaking, that punch was enough to completely make Sean lose his fighting ability, but the fact was like a loud slap on his face. That punch of yours was indeed heavy enough. This was the first time I was injured, Sean said calmly, his left hand hanging down weakly, and his entire left shoulder seemed to have been hit by a hammer. Throw it to a person for the first time. In the hands of a man, to be honest, I wasn't in a good mood. Sean's right hand was like iron, strangling the Punisher's neck. If it weren't for the boiling life energy in his body, which quickly repaired his injuries, he might have become the Punisher's prisoner at this time. I made a mistake. Perhaps from the beginning to now, I have gone too smoothly along the way. All the enemies I encountered fell at my feet, and I encountered almost no setbacks or obstacles, so I was a little bloated. This is not a good phenomenon. Even Achilles will be shot in the ankle by a hidden arrow and die. I will encounter more and more powerful opponents in the future. If I continue to maintain this arrogant mentality, maybe in the future it will suffer an irreversible defeat. Sean seemed to be reflecting on himself. His voice was neither fast nor slow, and his calm eyes were devoid of any emotion. His right hand gradually exerted force, like a tightening iron clamp, and the Punisher who was holding his throat was close to suffocation. The 2 eyeballs were bloodshot and protruding, and not even a sound could be made. With a bang, the 200-pound body fell to the floor with a dull sound. Sean moved his injured left shoulder, and the broken bones were intact under the golden light. Okay, let's make it quick. Maybe I can take home a cheese and nut pizza before the pizza place closes. Sean didn't even look at the Punisher, who had lost consciousness due to lack of oxygen. The golden light in his eyes flashed out. He stared at the alert Jessica and Danny Rand, with a dangerous smile on his lips. Bloom. A black Passat parked outside a Chinese restaurant in Chinatown. Alexandra, one of the leaders of the Hand, leaned on the back seat of the car. She had been paying attention to the battle from the beginning. If Sean had not appeared, according to her original plan was to use the most powerful force in her hands to bring Kunlun's iron fist in front of her. Erica, if Wesley's boss fails, then it will be your turn. Alexandra gently stroked the woman sitting next to her like a tame pet. The woman named Erica turned her head blankly, her eyes devoid of any emotion, like an exquisite puppet, lacking the breath of life. No one would have thought that this cold and expressionless woman was the Hand's most powerful weapon, the legendary humanoid weapon, the Black Sky. If Wesley's boss didn't make a mistake, then it's up to you to deal with him. No unknown person has ever dared to raise conditions with the Hand. Alexandra's eyes were cold. Since the other party was so open-minded, she might as well let him do it. You should pay the price for your greed. Erica nodded, holding the katana in her hand. For Haikong, any weapon that can tear flesh and blood and harvest life is an extension of its own limbs. Compared with powerful thermal weapons, this ancient and cruel cold weapons can better satisfy her inner desire for killing and blood. Time passed by, and just when Alexandra was waiting impatiently, the door of the Chinese restaurant was pushed open, and a man wearing a black mask hummed a relaxing tune and dragged a body on the ground. Drag the body. Danny Rand, I brought you the Iron Fist of Kunlun, Sean said in a relaxed tone, throwing the bruised and swollen Danny Rand onto the black Passat as if throwing away garbage. As if to retaliate for that heavy punch, there was no intact skin on the Kunlun Iron Fist's face. His entire face had at least swollen in size, and at least a dozen of the bones in his body were broken. Don't worry, I was very measured in my actions. They are all skin injuries. Just find a doctor to treat him. He will not be disabled or life-threatening. Danny Rand, who was still conscious, almost wanted to curse when he heard these words, but unfortunately he couldn't even move a finger now, let alone make a sound. Erica, deal with him, Alexandra ordered. Now that Kunlun's Iron Fist is in hand, there is no need for the guy in front of her to exist. Erica, dressed in a black and red ninja outfit, stepped out of the car, her sharp samurai sword slowly unsheathed. She stared at Sean, who seemed to be unaware, with an animalistic light surging in her pupils. There is really no spirit of contract. Sean shook his neck as he had expected it. It was as if electric current was running fiercely in his skin. A slight stimulation filled his body. The repeated battles allowed him to faintly touch the essence of his own strength. Midtown Circle Financial Corporation, conference room. The 5 leaders of the hand gathered together for a rare occasion. Alexandra sat at the head of the table. A hint of uncontrollable excitement and joy appeared on her indifferent face. Her life was in danger, and she could feel her body organs every day. The decline, the shadow of death was approaching step by step, and the cold breath lingered on her body, as if the cold breath of death woke her up from a midnight dream. Death is always the greatest fear of human beings, especially for people like Alexandra who have lived for centuries. The longer they experience a long life, the more they are afraid of death. I have captured Danny Rand, the only descendant of Kunlun, and now he has fallen into our hands. Alexandra lost her past calmness, and was about to regain her life. The ecstasy made this hand member the leader's heart was full of fiery emotions. Hundreds of years ago, in order to practice the legendary art of immortality, we escaped from Kunlun and took away the dragon bones in the dragon's lair. With the help of the huge life energy contained in them, we gained a long-lasting life, surviving for centuries. But as time goes by, the dragon bones are gradually exhausted, and we are once again faced with the shadow of death, but God has not abandoned us. After hundreds of years of searching, we have found the burial place of another dragon skeleton. Kunlun the power sealed it underground, and only the power of the Iron Fist can open that door. Alexandra's voice echoed in the conference room, and the other 4 leaders listened quietly. They were all monks in Kunlun. Because they coveted the legendary art of immortality, they stole the dragon bone remains and escaped from the strict rules together. The mysterious land of Kunlun, using the dragon bone that can bring people back to life, formed the hand and transformed into 5 fingers. For hundreds of years, the hand has been growing and growing into an international criminal organization with power all over the world. When Danny Rand falls into our hands, will Daredevil and his gang give up? Japanese Murakami is worried. He is well aware of the troubles faced by the street heroes of Hell's Kitchen. Those people have always been very troublesome to the hand. Headache. Daredevil, the Punisher, and other weird guys cost Hell's Kitchen gangs countless businesses, and the hand was one of the victims. Alexandra didn't take it seriously. She said coldly, Black Sky will deal with them. Hearing this answer, Murakami said no more. Black Sky is the inheritance they got from Kunlun. It is similar to the ancient and obscure sacrificial witchcraft. They believe in the original mysterious demon, beast, at the expense of their own emotions and reason. Obtaining powerful power from it, if the conditions for being the host of Black Sky are not too harsh, then the hand will be enough to create a terrifying army. Erica is the most suitable host I have ever seen. Black Sky is in her body and her power can be fully exerted. Daredevil and the others will not be her opponents. Alexandra is full of confidence. Erica, who was supposed to be dead, was resurrected by her with the dragon bone and forgot the past memories. She is undoubtedly the best container to carry the Black Sky. Find a way to get Danny Rand to open the underground seal and dig out the dragon bones as soon as possible. We can't stay in New York for too long. A mysterious organization is already targeting us. Sawanda, a warlord from Africa, said. As a local snake in New York, Mrs. Gao nodded. This elderly woman has a meticulous and powerful intelligence network. She knows that there is a mysterious agency hidden in the dark in this country, which specializes in dealing with supernatural events and unconventional emergencies. It's just that the mysterious organization is hidden too deeply, like an iceberg floating on the sea. Only the exposed corner can be glimpsed. Even with the intelligence strength of the hand, it is impossible to detect more information. In 1 week, dig the dragon bones. Alexandra set a deadline. I will plan the transportation route. When the keel is dug out, it will touch the foundation of New York and trigger a series of chain reactions. At that time, we will take advantage of the chaos and leave. Botu, who had been silent, said. The 5 leaders of the hand rarely get together. They all have different identities in real life. For example, Alexandra is a successful entrepreneur in New York, while Sawanda is a separatist warlord on the African continent. Murakami is in charge of a Japanese consortium, etc. Everyone has his own power. Of course, these identities are just cover on the surface. Underneath the glamour or prominent status, there is a terrifying and deep darkness. What about Wesley's boss? Mrs. Gao asked aloud as if she remembered something. Erica will kill him. Hell's Kitchen doesn't need too many careerists. Alexandra put her hands on the conference table. The man had an unpredictable origin and seemed to be very familiar with the past of the hand and Kunlun. Understanding made her very wary. Dangerous people should be nipped in the cradle, said the hand leader. For so many years, the hand has only had 5 fingers. How could Alexandra tolerate one more person to come in and share the dragon bone secret elixir of immortality with them? Everything went according to plan. Alexandra looked around at the other 4 companions. For hundreds of years, they relied on and helped each other, established a huge hand, and escaped from the strict rules of Kunlun. One day, we will return to that place and gain endless life. Mrs. Gao, Murakami, Sawanda, Botu, and the 4 leaders of the hand also stood up. They escaped from Kunlun hundreds of years ago and have always been most wary of that mysterious place that exists in another dimension. And vigilance, but deep down in my heart, I always want to return to that place, eager to get the dragon bone remains contained therein and the mystery of immortality. We can get the secret of Iron Fist from Danny Rand. He is not only the key to the underground door, but also the only road sign leading to Kunlun. A sneer broke out on Sawanda's dark face. Others also nodded in agreement. There will always be a day when the dragon bone remains are used up. If they can return to Kunlun, go deep into the dragon's cave, and dig out all the buried dragon bones, then they are only one step away from immortality. Just as the 5 leaders of the hand were thinking about a bright future, a clear sound of footsteps came faintly from outside the door. Erica pushed the door in with a bright samurai sword, and there was a faint smell of blood all over her body. Like a warrior who had just experienced a hearty killing, there was a sense of joyful satisfaction in his animalistic pupils. Did you kill that guy? Alexandra looked at Erica with satisfaction. After being inhabited by Haikong in her body, the original feelings and memories would gradually fade away, and in the end only the primitive instinct to kill would remain. Erica stared at her master, and the expressionless and indifferent face suddenly broke out into a shallow smile, which suddenly shocked Alexandra. As a black empty vessel, Erica stood quietly in the conference room, with black hair and red clothes, holding a long knife, like a blooming bloody rose, showing a strange beauty. His name is Sean. A slightly hoarse voice sounded. Erica turned sideways, and a young man wearing a black mask walked in slowly outside the door. Looking at the hand leaders with different expressions, Sean couldn't help but whisper, "We meet again, everyone. Are you surprised or surprised?" Back to 40 minutes ago, outside the Chinese restaurant in Chinatown, Sean and Erica were facing each other with a long knife. Watching the black Passat go away, the young man couldn't help but ask, "Are you from the hand?" Black Sky. Sean looked at the expressionless girl in red in front of him, like an exquisite doll. Her beautiful dark eyes were full of cruelty, as if a ferocious beast had taken over. This beautiful body. A sharp sword light struck out, and Erica remained silent. As a container that carries Haikong, apart from being able to maintain basic human behaviors, she is no different from a beast, and as Haikong grows in this body the longer she survives in the body, the original personality of Erica will become smaller and weaker, until she is completely swallowed up by her animal nature. Erica waved the long knife in her hand, and the bright blade cut through the air. Sean dodged with delicate steps. He wanted to see how terrifying the legendary humanoid weapon Black Sky was. His long black hair was dancing and flying. Sean frowned to avoid Erica's crazy attack. The bright sword light drew a fatal trajectory. If he was not careful, the sharp blade would tear his flesh and blood, and his body would be torn apart. The body was cut into broken limbs. As expected, Erica, who was reduced to a black empty vessel, completely evolved into a killing weapon. As the battle continued, her strength and speed increased significantly. Her red figure was like a ghost. Suddenly approaching Sean, the long knife raised a bright silver light from bottom to top, as if it was going to split the enemy in half. A chill surged through Sean's heart. He hit the side of the blade with a fist carrying heavy power, neutralizing Erica's ferocious attack. He immediately turned from defense to offense. His whole body was pressed like a mountain, and his tall body was filled with energy. With a frightening momentum, he punched hard. Erica, who couldn't dodge, was hit in the lower abdomen, and her soft and delicate body bent like a lobster. A powerful and heavy whip leg swept sideways, kicking Erica away, who was temporarily unable to fight. The red figure hit a parked car. The metal door immediately dented and the window glass shattered. Flying debris scattered all over the ground. Sean stood tall, looked at Erica, who was struggling to get up, and couldn't help but smacked his tongue. What an amazing will, a beast in human skin. Even for an invulnerable guy like Luke Cage, it would be difficult to get up immediately after receiving a heavy punch and whip kick from himself. However, Erica, with messy black hair, held up a long knife with one hand. On the ground, he took a few breaths and then regained his fighting strength. Those animalistic pupils stared at Sean, as if they couldn't feel any pain at all. What drove this body was only the endless desire to kill and fighting instinct. The swift light of the sword tore through the air, and the howling wind rumbled. The long sword turned into a ball of silver light, carrying a heart-stopping forest coldness, and shrouded Xiao Xiao. A standing street lamp was cut off straight away. The cut is as smooth as a mirror, which is enough to prove how amazing the power of the owner holding the long knife is. We should sit down and talk, Erica. Sean stepped forward, like an illusory shadow, his voice appearing and disappearing. You can control it, any power can be controlled, as long as you have a strong enough will, don't become its slave. Erica said nothing. Her dark eyes fluctuated for a moment, and then returned to normal. The sword light was fast and fierce, like the silver light blooming in the void. Sean's chest rose and fell, and the surging energy surged like a tide. Time seemed to be passing by. At this moment, the pace slowed down, and the tall body turned into a shadow. The young man avoided the sharp edge of the long knife, and a powerful arm crossed the space and strangled the soft neck of the red figure. Erica Nakis. Sean casually waved the long knife away from the opponent's hand. He got close to the delicate and beautiful mixed-race face and said softly, "You were adopted by Daredevil's teacher Stickman when you were a child. Later, you were fostered in the home of a Greek diplomat. In college, you met Matt Murdock, a charming young blind man, and you fell in love." The hoarse and deep voice echoed in Erica's ears, and struggle appeared in the empty pupils. The beastly nature in the brain roared violently, and waves of heart-wrenching pain shot through her body. Sean's arms gradually exerted force until Erica felt like she was suffocating. He looked deeply at the poor girl whose body was occupied by the black sky, and said lightly, "You remember all this, you are how to die, how to be resurrected, and then let that beastly monster steal your body. Erica, you have your own name, family, and lover, that beast can't control you." Erica's legs kept kicking, and the feeling of almost suffocation brought her to the verge of death. The man's voice was far and near, like a call from the dark, stimulating the long-forgotten emotions and memories in her heart. Sean approached the struggling girl in red. He looked at the painfully twisted face and asked softly, "Tell me, who are you?" Counting the time silently in his mind, after 30 seconds, Erica, who was breathing hard, still didn't give an answer. Sean's eyes gradually turned cold, and he sighed regretfully, preparing to kill the blood-red rose with his own hands. Erica, Nakis. Amidst the strange whistling sounds, the girl in red, who was lingering on the edge of death, said her name intermittently. "Nice job." Sean let go of his arm, and the girl in red and black hair knelt down in front of him, panting like a fish starved of oxygen. The young man lifted Erica's chin, with a satisfied smile on his lips. Next, it's time for revenge. It seems like you don't want to see me. Sean spread his hands and walked to Erica's side with a smile. You are too superstitious about the power of the black sky, and you also underestimate human will. Erica, kill him. Alexandra rushed in front of the woman in red and gave orders hysterically. The leader of the Hand had lost his former grace and composure. In the hundreds of years of the Hand, there has never been an example of the black sky losing control. How could human beings resist the power of the beast with just their weak will? This broke Alexandra's cognition. She did not believe that Erica had regained consciousness and was still trying to command the humanoid weapon. My name is Erica Nakis. The girl in red clothes and black hair swung the long knife and cut off Alexandra's head neatly without any hesitation. Blood gushed out like a fountain and splashed on the cold and delicate face. Erica licked the corners of her mouth slightly, an almost coquettish smile bloomed on her cold and stern face, and a hearty pleasure appeared in her eyes. Killing satisfied her, and blood made her happy. Let's welcome the new leader of the Hand. Sean clapped his hands, put his arm around Erica's shoulders, and pushed her to the chief position in the conference room. Looking around at the other 4 leaders, the young man asked softly with a faint smile, who agrees? Who opposes? The sound of huge metal collisions echoed in the empty underground. Sean rode the elevator all the way down. Erica, who was following him, looked at the masked man from time to time. They will not obey me sincerely. Whether it is Murakami or Suwanda, these leaders of the Hand have their own ideas. Erica put on a long black trench coat and held a short knife in her hand. Her beautiful eyes no longer shone with a cruel and ferocious animalistic light, replaced by the clear thinking of a human being. How can we make them succumb by force alone? These people are old guys who have lived for centuries. How can they give their loyalty easily? In the dimly lit metal cage, the young man smiled and said, kill Alexandra, you are just a deterrent to them. You are the only black sky in the Hand, the totem of faith for hundreds of years, and those ninjas have fanatical worship of you. This is your chance to control this huge organization. What about Murakami and the others? Have they all been killed? The murderous intention flashed in her eyes. Perhaps as the first person she saw when she woke up, Erica had a strange and inexplicable trust in this strange man. Feel. Sean turned his head and glanced at Erica. Although her beautiful and delicate mixed-race face had a bit more human vitality, it still maintained an iceberg-like indifference. As a container that has carried black space, even if a clear consciousness is restored, the missing human emotions will be difficult to find immediately. Killing will not solve the problem. The Hand is a huge organization with a strict internal structure. It has footprints all over the world and secretly controls many multinational trading companies. It also has strong political power, such as the African warlord Sawanda. He has manipulated coups in countless countries, and Murakami is also closely related to the Japanese giant Yoshida Pharmaceutical. These are the real forces of the Hand. Sean talked freely. He had already asked Wesley to investigate the Hand before. Combining the information in his mind, he could at least roughly outline the outline of this huge organization. Then why did you? Erica's eyes were full of doubts. If this was the case, then why did Sean push her to the position of leader of the Hand just now? The situation will change, the young man wearing a black mask said calmly. The remaining leaders of the Hand, they currently need Black Sky to deal with the street heroes of Hell's Kitchen, so even if you kill Alexandra, they will not do it rashly, because for the time being, the most important thing for them is to dig out the keel in the ground extends its own life, and everything else can be put aside. This is your chance. When Madame Gao, Murakami, Suwanda, and Fighter fight to the death with the street heroes of Hell's Kitchen, you can slowly integrate the power in your hands. Erica stared at the man next to her. His casual tone contained a terrifying aura of darkness. Perhaps due to the influence of the black sky, she was actually very obsessed with this feeling. Like a candlelight in the night, attracting mobs to come closer, Erica, who had been parasitized by the black sky, was full of admiration and recognition for Sean's seemingly casual, but actually cold conspiracy, as if she had found a similar kind. Of course, it all depends on your wishes. Sean paused, and then continued. You have regained your freedom, Erica, now you have the right to choose your own life. You can leave the hand, yes, return to Matt Murdock's side, or stand on the side of Stickmin and destroy the evil organization The Hand. There are countless choices in life, pursue whichever life you like. Sensing Erica's surprised look, Sean guessed the other person's thoughts and said calmly, what the Hand values is exactly what I value least. Relying on the so-called heel to continue life, this is different from those lying on the ground. What's the difference between a decrepit old man living in a hospital bed and relying on oxygen tubes and life support equipment? The meaning of life has never been about its length, at least for me. The young man's voice echoed in the underground space, and every word was quite shocking. Even without your help, I can still hold the Union in the palm of my hand. The difference is just that I have to use more methods. Erica, we are not superficial allies who use each other. I don't want to get anything from you, and you don't need to do anything for me. Do anything. Erica was silent. She was adopted by a stickman when she was a child and received harsh and cruel training. Later, she was sent to the family of a Greek diplomat and became a wealthy lady in the upper class. Most of her life sometimes, things are done with purpose or plan. Few people will tell her that you have the right to choose freely. Erica's face was obscured by her long black hair. She was mumbling, as if she was hesitant to speak. With a boom, the elevator reached the bottom, and Sean walked out first. The dark underground space was filled with a rotten, musty smell. Using the name of a construction company as a guise, The Hand bought the building and then continued to dig underground in an attempt to find the burial place of the dragon bones. In the end, they achieved their goal. After spending a lot of manpower and material resources, The Hand discovered the burial place of the dragon bone remains. After confirming that it was correct, Alexandra was overjoyed and prepared to start mining the dragon bones immediately. Who knew that a basin of cold water would come from with rain pouring down from their heads? A sealed door blocked their way. Have you not tried other methods? Sean went deep into the underground space and saw the door engraved with ancient writings. Alexandra has tried many methods, such as explosives, drilling rigs, etc., but tough methods cannot work. This door is a seal set by Kunlun. As long as you don't enter through the correct way, the mechanism behind the door will immediately, when activated, the entire space will collapse. Erica explained. Sean stroked the obscure words engraved on the door, like an ancient language. The door would only open automatically if activated by some special power. This is the seal set by Kunlun Iron Fist, so you need another Iron Fist. Sean understood the cause and effect. Only Kunlun's unique inherited power, Chi, can activate this door buried deep in the ground. So Danny Rand is extremely important to the Alliance. Erica stood in front of the ancient stone door. Behind this door was buried the remains of a dragon bone. The huge life energy contained in it can bring people back to life. Extend life. The Hand's ability to have political allies in many countries relies on the magic of the dragon bone. Even the rich and powerful politicians have endless desire for life. Everyone is afraid of the coming of death. As they age, they will become more and more nostalgic for the beauty of this world. The Hand has the secret medicine that can bring people back to life, so it can naturally attract a large number of solid allies. Greed often makes people's eyes lost. Sean said a motto. His eyes were meaningful. For the leaders of the clan, behind this door is the continuation of life, but it may also be the burial ground. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.